A billionaire's empire is about to crumble in the next 60 seconds. Ethan Carlisle built his fortune on ruthless precision, but tonight, surrounded by crystal chandeliers and Italian executives who refuse to shake his hand, he's watching $900 million slip through his fingers because of one catastrophic mistake: arrogance. The woman who will save him? A waitress he humiliated 3 minutes ago. She's standing 10 feet away, invisible, exhausted, carrying a tray of sparkling water while her entire future burns in silence. This is the story of how one brutal night in Manhattan changed two broken lives forever. Stay until the end, hit that like button, and comment what city you're watching from so I can see how far this story travels. The dining room at Luminaire smelled like old money and fresh panic. Ethan Carlisle stood near the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Fifth Avenue. His phone pressed so hard against his ear that his jaw ached. His reflection stared back at him from the glass. Sharp suit, sharper eyes, the kind of face that made boardrooms go quiet. He was 32 years old, worth $3.7 billion, and currently watching the most important deal of his career die in real time. No, Marco, listen to me. Ethan's voice cut through the ambient noise of clinking silverware and hushed conversations. The terms are more than fair. Your family gets capital infusion, global distribution, and you maintain creative control of the... The phone went dead. Not a dropped call. Not a bad connection. Marco Giordano, patriarch of Italy's most prestigious luxury goods dynasty, had hung up on him. Ethan stared at the black screen, his breath coming shorter than it should. Around him, Luminaire continued its expensive ballet, waiters gliding between tables, businessmen laughing over 20-year scotch, women in diamonds pretending not to notice him. Nobody here understood what just happened. Nobody here gave a damn that the Giordano deal, 18 months of negotiations, countless flights to Florence, enough legal fees to buy a small island, had just collapsed because some 70-year-old Italian craftsman didn't like being told what his company was worth. Mr. Carlisle? His assistant, Jennifer, materialized at his elbow. 26, Harvard MBA, terrified of him. Everyone was terrified of him. It made things efficient. The Giordano's lawyer is still at the table, she said quietly. But Marco and his son just left for their hotel. Sir, I think we should get Russo back on the phone. Now. I tried. He's not answering. Then call the hotel. Tell them I'm coming over. Tell them I'll double the investment if Marco gives me 10 minutes. Jennifer's face did something complicated. Mr. Carlisle, with respect, I don't think more money is the issue. Mr. Giordano seemed upset about how the conversation went earlier. When you suggested restructuring their workshop divisions, I suggested modernizing a company that's hemorrhaging cash because they're too proud to admit nobody hand-stitches leather anymore. Ethan turned away from the window, scanning the restaurant. Where's my translator? The one who was supposed to make sure this exact thing didn't happen? Robert? He's at the table with the lawyer. But, sir, honestly, I don't think the language barrier is... Everything is a language barrier when you're negotiating with Italians who think their great-grandfather's legacy is more valuable than quarterly earnings. Ethan started walking toward the private dining area at the back of the restaurant, his shoes hitting the marble floor with sharp, impatient clicks. They want respect? Fine. I'll respect them all the way to bankruptcy. See how their precious traditions feed their workers then. Jennifer hurried after him, heels clicking double time. Sir, maybe we should regroup tomorrow. Let everyone cool down. We're on a deadline. The board votes Friday. If I don't have this deal locked by Thursday morning, Harrison's faction will kill the whole European expansion, and I'll spend the next 6 months fighting a coup instead of building the company. He stopped abruptly, making Jennifer nearly collide with his back. You want to know what the problem is? The problem is, I'm trying to save these people from themselves, and they're too stubborn to see it. That's when he heard it. A soft voice, barely audible over the ambient restaurant noise, speaking flawless Italian. Ethan's head snapped toward the sound. At first, he couldn't locate the source. The dining room was full of conversations, laughter, the gentle chaos of expensive people being expensively served. Then he saw her, a waitress, standing near one of the marble columns that separated the main dining area from the private rooms, her back to him, speaking into her phone in rapid, fluid Italian. She was maybe 30, wearing the standard Luminaire uniform, Black dress, white apron, her dark hair pulled back in a bun that had started to come loose during what was clearly a long shift. Her shoulders were curved inward, exhausted. One hand balanced a tray of water glasses, the other held her phone. She wasn't just speaking Italian, she was speaking formal, educated Italian, the kind you didn't learn from apps or semester abroad programs, the kind that came from actual study, actual immersion, actual respect for the language. Something hot and sharp twisted in Ethan's chest. He changed direction, walking straight toward her. "Sir?" Jennifer's voice behind him held a note of alarm. "What are you—" Ethan didn't answer. He was already moving, his focus narrowed to a single point. This woman who apparently spoke better Italian than the expensive translator he'd hired. This nobody in a waitress uniform who'd been invisible to him 5 seconds ago and was now the most interesting person in the room. She hadn't noticed him yet. She was still on her phone, her voice low and urgent. "No, Matteo, you need to take the medication. I don't care if it makes you tired. That's the whole point." Ethan stopped directly beside her. "Excuse me." The waitress startled badly, nearly dropping her tray. Her phone clattered against the tray's edge as she fumbled to catch both. She spun toward him, eyes wide. Brown eyes, he noticed absently. The kind that probably looked warm when she wasn't exhausted and scared. I'm sorry, sir. I wasn't—" She was stammering in English now, her Italian fluency replaced by nervous American vowels. "I'm not supposed to use my phone during shift. My brother is sick and I needed to make sure—" "You speak Italian." Ethan cut through her explanation like scissors through paper. She blinked. Yes? I studied—" "How well?" "I'm sorry?" "How well do you speak Italian?" He enunciated each word separately, watching her face shift from confused to wary. Around them, other diners were starting to notice the scene. This tall, clearly wealthy man interrogating a waitress who looked like she wanted the floor to swallow her whole. I'm conversational? I studied art history in grad school, and a lot of the research required art history. Ethan almost laughed. Of course, another overqualified dreamer working service jobs because she'd chosen passion over pragmatism. The city was full of them, PhD candidates slinging coffee, musicians driving Ubers, artists waiting tables while their trust funds ran dry. "So you spent 6 years learning to talk about paintings, and now you're bringing me water glasses." The woman's face went very still. Something shifted in those brown eyes, not anger exactly, but something colder. Recognition, maybe. The look of someone who'd heard this speech before and was tired of it. "I bring a lot of people water glasses," she said quietly. "It pays my brother's medical bills. But yes, I studied Renaissance art at Columbia before my parents died, and I had to drop out to take care of my teenage brother who has cerebral palsy. So if you'll excuse me, I need to get back to being invisible." She turned to walk away. "Wait." The word came out sharper than Ethan intended. "I need—" "Your water is already on your table, Mr. Carlyle. If you need something else, any of the other servers can—" "I need an Italian translator." That stopped her. She turned back slowly, her expression guarded. "You have one. I saw him at your table earlier. I have an idiot who learned Italian from business tapes and keeps conjugating verbs like he's ordering pizza." Ethan stepped closer, lowering his voice. "I just lost a $900 million deal because Marco Giordano thinks I'm a soulless American corporate raider who doesn't understand the difference between profit margins and cultural legacy. I need someone who can actually communicate, not just translate words, but translate meaning. Can you do that?" The waitress, he realized he didn't even know her name, looked at him like he'd just asked her to juggle fire. "Mr. Carlyle, I'm not a professional translator. I just studied the language for academic purposes. I don't know anything about corporate negotiations or—" "You don't need to know about corporate negotiations. You need to know about Italian pride, Italian history, Italian sensitivity about their family businesses being bought by Americans. You need to make them understand that I'm not trying to destroy what they built. I'm trying to save it. Can you do that or not?" She was quiet for a long moment, her fingers tightening on the tray. Behind her, Ethan saw Jennifer hovering nervously, clearly unsure whether to intervene. Other waiters were slowing their routes, pretending not to eavesdrop. This whole conversation was becoming a scene, and Ethan didn't care at all. "How much?" the waitress asked finally. "Excuse me? You're offering me money, right? That's what this is? You need help, I need money, so how much are you offering?" Ethan felt something unfamiliar. Was it respect? This woman was exhausted, clearly overwhelmed, probably scared of losing her job for talking back to a customer. But she was negotiating. He could work with that. $5,000, he said. "One night. You help me fix this deal, you get $5,000 cash." Her eyes widened. "For one night of translation? For saving my company's European expansion and possibly my entire career?" He pulled out his phone, pulling up the email from Marco's lawyer. "They're flying back to Florence tomorrow morning. If I can't get Marco to answer my calls before then, this whole thing is dead. I need someone who can reach past his anger and make him hear what I'm actually saying. Is that you or not?" The waitress looked down at her tray, at the water glasses sweating condensation onto the polished silver. When she looked up again, something had changed in her face, a decision made. "My name is Claire," she said. "Claire Bennett. And if I'm going to help you, you need to stop calling me waitress. And you need to understand something. The reason Marco hung up on you isn't because of bad translation. It's because you told him his family's 90-year legacy of craftsmanship was inefficient and outdated. No amount of good Italian is going to fix that unless you actually change what you're saying." Ethan felt his jaw tighten. He wasn't used to being corrected. He definitely wasn't used to being corrected by exhausted waitresses who were currently lecturing him in the middle of a luxury restaurant. "I told him the truth," he said. "You told him your truth. There's a difference." Claire shifted the tray to her other arm. "Look, I don't know you, Mr. Carlyle, and I'm sure you're very successful at whatever it is you do, but I spent 3 years researching Italian textile manufacturers for my thesis. I know how these families think. I know what they value. And I'm telling you right now, if you walk into that conversation tomorrow with the same attitude you had tonight, you could offer them $1 billion in perfect Italian, and they'd still tell you to leave. So what do you suggest?" "I suggest you figure out what you actually want. Do you want to own the Giordano company, or do you want to work with them? Because those are very different things, and Italian families like theirs can smell the difference from a mile away." Ethan stared at her. No one talked to him like this. Jennifer looked ready to faint. A couple at a nearby table had stopped pretending not to listen and were openly watching now. And somehow, impossibly, this broke, exhausted waitress with a sick brother and a dead-end job was the first person in 18 months who'd actually made sense to him about this deal. "Okay," he said quietly. "Say I hire you. What happens next?" Claire took a breath. "Next, you let me finish my shift without getting me fired. Then you give me the contact information for Marco Giordano and anyone else involved in this negotiation. Then I spend tonight reading everything I can about the deal, the company, and what you're actually trying to accomplish. And tomorrow morning, we call Marco and you let me do the talking. All of it. You don't interrupt, you don't correct me, you don't try to take over. Because if this is going to work, you need to trust me to handle the communication while you handle the actual business. Can you do that?" It was a challenge. Ethan recognized it immediately. She was testing whether he could actually let go of control long enough to let someone else help him. It should have annoyed him. Instead, it made him want to smile. $5,000 tonight, he said. Another $5,000 if you get Marco to take a meeting. And if you somehow save this deal, I'll pay you $50,000. Claire's face went pale. That's what it's worth to me. Do we have an agreement? She looked at him for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Then she set down her tray on a nearby service station, pulled out her phone, and handed it to him. "Put your number in," she said. "I get off at midnight. Send me everything you have on the deal by then." Ethan took her phone. It was old, the screen cracked in one corner, and typed in his contact information. When he handed it back, their fingers brushed briefly. Hers were cold. "Thank you," he said, and was surprised to find he meant it. Claire nodded once, picked up her tray, and walked away without another word. Ethan watched her go, watched her disappear into the kitchen's swinging doors, watched the space where she'd been standing. "Sir?" Jennifer appeared at his elbow again, her voice very small. "What just happened?" "I just hired a waitress to save a $900 million deal." Is that a good idea?" Ethan turned back toward the private dining room where Marco's lawyer was probably packing up to leave, where Robert, the useless translator, was probably wondering why his boss had just walked away mid-conversation, where everything Ethan had built over the last year was currently falling apart. "I have no idea," he said, "but it's the only idea I've got." In fact, at 11:47 p.m., Ethan was still awake in his penthouse apartment in Tribeca, scrolling through emails and trying not to think about how badly he'd mishandled the dinner. His son, James, was asleep down the hall, 5 years old, too young to understand that Daddy's work trips kept getting longer, that Daddy's patience kept getting shorter, that Daddy was slowly becoming the kind of man who humiliated waitresses in public and thought money could fix everything. His phone buzzed. Unknown number. "This is Claire Bennett. I received your files. We need to talk before you call Marco." Ethan sat up straighter, suddenly alert. He typed back, "Now?" Her response came immediately. "Unless you want to lose this deal in the next 8 hours, yes, now." He called her. She answered on the first ring. "You can't call Marco," she said without preamble. No hello, no pleasantries. Her voice sounded different on the phone, steadier, more confident. "Not yet. He's too angry and you don't have the right message yet." "I've been building this message for 18 months, Ethan said, trying to keep his voice even. "I know exactly what I'm offering." "You know what you're offering financially. You have no idea what you're offering emotionally." He heard papers rustling on her end. "I spent the last 3 hours reading through your proposal, your communications with Marco, and every email your translator sent. And Mr. Carlyle, I'm going to be very direct with you. You're approaching this entire negotiation like it's a transaction. It's not. It's a marriage." A marriage. The Giordano family has been making luxury leather goods since 1935. Marco's grandfather started the company in a single-room workshop in Florence. His father expanded it. Marco and his son Alessandro have spent their entire lives protecting it, refining it, keeping it independent when bigger companies tried to buy them out. They don't need your money. They need someone who understands what they're protecting. Ethan rubbed his eyes. Their company is losing market share to fast fashion and Chinese manufacturers. They're down 18% year over year. In 5 years, they'll be bankrupt if they don't modernize. I'm offering them survival. "You're offering them extinction dressed up as survival," Claire said bluntly. "Your proposal eliminates 60% of their artisan workforce and outsources production to contract manufacturers. You're keeping the Giordano name, but killing everything it stands for." "Why would they accept that?" "Because the alternative is complete failure." "No, the alternative is finding a partner who actually values what they do, not someone who sees their craftsmanship as inefficiency." Ethan stood up, pacing across his living room floor. Through the windows, Manhattan glittered. Millions of lights, millions of people, millions of transactions happening right now that didn't care about tradition or legacy or whatever romantic nonsense Claire was selling. "This is business," he said. "Not a history seminar. This is both. And until you understand that, Marco will never trust you." Claire paused. "Tell me something, Mr. Carlyle. Why do you actually want this company? Not the strategic reasons, not the market expansion. Why do you personally want to own Giordano?" No one had ever asked him that. The board wanted European expansion. His investors wanted luxury brand positioning. His competitors wanted to beat him to the acquisition. But what did Ethan want? "I don't know," he said finally, the admission feeling strange in his mouth. "Then we need to figure that out. Because when I talk to Marco tomorrow, he's going to ask. And if we don't have a real answer, we're done." Ethan looked out at the city, at all those lights burning against the dark. "What do you suggest?" he asked. Claire was quiet for a moment. When she spoke again, her voice was softer. "I suggest you tell me the truth about something. The Hendrick Company. 7 years ago. What happened there?" Ethan's blood went cold. "How do you know about Hendrick?" "I'm good at research. It took me 40 minutes to find the articles. You bought a heritage furniture manufacturer, promised to preserve their traditional methods, then gutted the company and sold the real estate 18 months later. 12 generations of furniture makers lost their jobs. The founder's grandson killed himself 6 months after the sale. So tell me, Mr. Carlyle, was that business too?" The apartment felt very quiet. Ethan could hear his own breathing, could hear the faint sounds of traffic far below, could hear everything except the right words to explain what had happened with Hendrick. "That was different," he said finally. "How?" "I was 25. I was trying to prove something. I made mistakes. And are you making those same mistakes now? No. Then prove it. Claire's voice was hard now, challenging. Tomorrow morning, we call Marco together, and you're going to tell him the truth about Hendrik. You're going to own what you did, explain why it won't happen again, and give him a real reason to believe you've changed. And then I'm going to translate that into Italian in a way that reaches past his anger and touches his heart. Can you do that? Ethan thought about James, asleep down the hall. James, who was growing up watching his father build empires and lose pieces of his soul. James, who deserved better than a father who'd become so good at winning that he'd forgotten what he was winning for. Yes, he said quietly. I can do that. Good. I'll meet you at your office at 7 a.m. Don't drink coffee before then. You'll sound anxious on the phone. And Mr. Carlyle? What? Stop treating this like a transaction you're trying to close. Start treating it like a relationship you're trying to build. That's the only way this works. She hung up before he could respond. Ethan stood in his dark apartment, holding his phone, feeling something uncomfortable and unfamiliar working its way through his chest. It took him a minute to identify it. Shame. When was the last time he'd felt ashamed of how he did business? When was the last time someone had called him out for treating people like chess pieces instead of human beings? When was the last time he'd actually stopped to ask himself whether winning was worth what he was losing? He walked down the hall to James's room, pushing open the door quietly. His son was sprawled across his bed, one arm flung over his stuffed elephant, breathing the deep, easy breaths of childhood sleep. The nightlight cast soft shadows across his face. He looked like his mother, Ethan thought, with the usual pang of grief. Sarah had been dead for 3 years now, and James was forgetting her face, and Ethan was too busy building companies to notice his son growing up without her. I'm going to do better, Ethan whispered to the sleeping child. I'm going to figure this out. James didn't answer. The elephant stared at Ethan with its button eyes, judging nothing. Ethan closed the door softly and went back to his office to prepare for tomorrow's call. But this time he wasn't preparing a pitch or a strategy or a negotiation tactic. This time he was preparing to tell the truth, and he had no idea if that would be enough. Claire Bennett sat in her cramped Brooklyn apartment at 2:17 a.m., surrounded by printouts of the Giordano deal and 3 empty cups of coffee, trying not to think about the fact that she'd just agreed to gamble her rent money on a billionaire's ability to be honest. Her younger brother Matteo was asleep in the next room, his breathing labored even with the medications. The medical bills were stacked on the kitchen counter, $4,300 due by the end of the month, another $2,800 for the specialist appointment next week, and the physical therapy costs that insurance wouldn't cover because apparently learning to walk better at age 19 wasn't medically necessary. $5,000 tonight. Another $5,000 if Marco took the meeting. $50,000 if the deal somehow closed. It was insane. It was impossible. It was exactly the kind of stupid, desperate hope that got people like her crushed by people like Ethan Carlyle. But she'd looked into his eyes tonight, there in the restaurant with his expensive suit and his aggressive confidence and his complete certainty that money solved everything. And underneath all that armor, she'd seen something familiar, someone trying so hard to win that they'd forgotten how to be human. She knew that feeling. She'd felt it herself these past 8 years, grinding through double shifts and night classes and endless hospital waiting rooms, fighting so hard to keep Matteo alive and cared for that she'd forgotten there was supposed to be more to life than just surviving. Maybe that's why she'd said yes. Not because she believed Ethan would actually change. Not because she thought one conversation could fix 18 months of bad negotiation, but because something in her recognized something in him. The same tired desperation, the same fear of failing, the same loneliness that came from carrying too much weight for too long. Her phone buzzed, a text from Ethan. Thank you for tonight. I mean that. Claire stared at the message for a long moment. Then she typed back. Don't thank me yet. Thank me if this actually works. His response came immediately. What are the odds? She smiled despite herself. Honestly, about 30%. But I'm good at long shots. Ethan. So am I. Claire. Then I guess we'll see what happens at 7 a.m. Ethan. Get some sleep. Claire. You too. She set down her phone and looked around her apartment, at the stacks of medical bills, at the research materials from her abandoned master's thesis gathering dust on the shelf, at the Columbia acceptance letter she'd framed years ago when she still believed intelligence and hard work were enough to build a future. Tomorrow morning, she was going to walk into a billionaire's office and try to save a deal she barely understood for a man she'd met 6 hours ago. It was reckless and stupid, and exactly the kind of thing that never worked in real life. But sometimes, Claire thought as she finally crawled into bed, long shots were all you had left. And sometimes, impossibly, they hit. Claire arrived at Carlisle Capital at 6:52 a.m., carrying a messenger bag stuffed with notes and running on 3 hours of sleep. The building was glass and steel, all sharp angles and reflective surfaces that made her feel small. The lobby smelled like expensive cleaning products and quiet power. She gave her name to security, half expecting them to turn her away. Instead, the guard checked his tablet and nodded toward the elevators. 42nd floor, Mr. Carlisle is expecting you. The elevator was empty. Claire watched her reflection in the polished doors. Same black pants she'd worn to work yesterday, a clean blouse she'd ironed at 5 a.m., her hair still damp from the shower. She looked exactly like what she was, someone who didn't belong here, pretending she did. The doors opened onto a reception area that probably cost more than her entire apartment building. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked Manhattan, the early morning sun turning the city golden. A woman sat behind a curved desk, perfectly composed at 7 in the morning. Miss Bennett? Mr. Carlisle is in his office, third door on the left. Claire followed the direction, her footsteps too loud on the marble floor. She found Ethan standing at his window, phone pressed to his ear, his other hand shoved in his pocket. He'd already been at work long enough to loosen his tie. He turned when she entered, holding up one finger. I don't care what Harrison thinks. Tell him the vote happens Friday with or without his support. He paused, listening. Then he can explain to the board why he killed $1 billion expansion over personal politics. I'll talk to you later. He hung up and looked at Claire properly for the first time since last night. Something flickered across his face. Surprise, maybe, at seeing her here in daylight, real and solid instead of just a desperate idea. You came, he said. You're paying me $5,000. Of course I came. Claire set her bag on the chair. Are you ready for this? No. Ethan's honesty caught her off guard. I spent half the night trying to figure out how to explain Hendrik, and I still don't have good answers. Good answers or easy answers? Is there a difference? Always. Claire pulled out her notes. The truth is never easy, Mr. Carlisle, but it's the only thing that might work. So tell me right now, before we call Marco, do you actually regret what happened with Hendrik Company, or do you just regret that it's making this deal harder? Ethan was quiet for a long moment. Outside, the city hummed with morning traffic, millions of people starting their days, most of them never thinking about legacy or tradition or the cost of ambition. I regret both, he said finally. I regret that I destroyed something beautiful because I was too young and too arrogant to see its value. And I regret that it taught me the wrong lesson, that winning meant being ruthless instead of being smart. The founder's grandson, Michael Hendrik, he called me 3 times after we finalized the sale. I never called him back. I thought he just wanted to complain about the severance packages. I didn't know he was falling apart. And when you found out he'd killed himself? Ethan's jaw tightened. I told myself it wasn't my fault, that he was mentally unstable, that business was business and personal tragedy was separate. I believed that for years. Then I had James, and Sarah died, and suddenly I understood what it felt like to have your entire world collapse while everyone around you kept doing business like nothing had changed. Claire studied him, this man who'd humiliated her last night, and was now standing in his expensive office admitting things that could destroy his reputation. She still didn't trust him, but she was starting to believe he might actually want to change. Okay, she said. Then that's what you tell Marco. Not the polished version, the real version. And you let him decide if he believes you. And if he doesn't, then we tried. Claire pulled out her phone. It's 7:23. Marco's an early riser, according to his interview in that Italian business magazine. He'll be awake. But Mr. Carlisle, before we do this, I need you to promise me something. What? You let me handle the conversation. I know you're used to controlling everything, but right now your control is the problem. Trust me to read the room. Trust me to know when to push and when to pull back. Can you do that? Ethan looked at her for a long moment. Then he nodded once. Make the call. Claire dialed Marco's number, her heart hammering. It rang 3 times, 4. She was starting to think he wouldn't answer when the line clicked. Pronto. Marco's voice was rough, guarded. Claire took a breath and switched to Italian, her voice calm and respectful. Good morning, Mr. Giordano. My name is Claire Bennett. I'm calling on behalf of Ethan Carlisle, but I want to be very clear. I'm not here to pressure you or waste your time. I'm here because Mr. Carlisle asked me to help him say something he should have said months ago. Would you be willing to listen for 5 minutes? Silence. Then, you are not the translator from last night. No, sir. That translator made many mistakes. I studied Italian art history at Columbia University. I spent 3 years researching textile manufacturers in Florence and Tuscany. I understand what your family has built, and I understand why you walked away from the negotiation. Then you understand why I will not change my mind. I understand why you shouldn't change your mind, not based on what Mr. Carlisle offered yesterday. But I'm asking you to hear what he wants to offer today, not as a business proposal, as an apology. Another long silence. Claire could hear background noise, dishes maybe, morning sounds of a hotel room. Marco was thinking. 5 minutes, he said finally. Then I am hanging up. Claire looked at Ethan and switched to English. He's listening. Tell him about Hendrik. All of it. Ethan moved closer to the phone, his hands gripping the edge of the desk. When he spoke, his voice was quieter than Claire had ever heard it. Marco, 7 years ago I destroyed a company called Hendrik Furniture. It was a 112-year-old family business in North Carolina. They made handcrafted furniture the same way their founders had. Careful, beautiful, expensive. I bought them because I saw market value in their brand. I promised the family I would preserve their legacy. Then I fired 80% of their workers, outsourced production to cheaper manufacturers, and sold their factory buildings to a real estate developer. 18 months later, the founder's grandson committed suicide. His name was Michael Hendrik. He was 34 years old. But Claire translated carefully, watching Ethan's face as she turned his confession into Italian. Marco said nothing. Ethan continued, I told myself it was just business, that I'd made the smart financial decision, that Michael's death wasn't my responsibility. But I was wrong. I killed something that mattered because I couldn't see past quarterly earnings. I turned people's life work into a transaction. And I've spent the last 7 years trying to convince myself that ruthlessness and success were the same thing. He paused. They're not. And I don't want to be that person anymore. Claire translated again, her voice steady even as something twisted in her chest. This wasn't the speech of a man trying to close a deal. This was the speech of a man trying to save himself. Marco's response came slowly. Why are you telling me this? Because you deserve to know who you're negotiating with, Ethan said. Because I don't want to lie to you about my past or my intentions. Because I'm asking you to trust me with something you love, and that requires honesty. He took a breath. I can't change what I did to Hendrik, but I can change what I do with Giordano. If you give me a chance, I will prove that I've learned the difference between owning something and honoring it. Claire finished translating and waited. The silence stretched so long she thought Marco had hung up. Then his voice came back, different now, still wary, but listening. What exactly are you proposing, Mr. Carlisle? Ethan looked at Claire. She could see the question in his eyes. What do I say now? She'd told him to be honest, but honesty only opened doors. It didn't guarantee what was on the other side. Claire made a decision. She switched back to Italian, speaking directly to Marco. Mr. Giordano, may I suggest something, not as Mr. Carlisle's translator, but as someone who understands what your family has built? The proposal you received yesterday was designed to modernize your company, but modernization isn't what you need. You need a partner who will invest in your traditions, not eliminate them. Someone who will help you reach new markets without compromising the craftsmanship that makes Giordano valuable in the first place. And you believe Mr. Carlisle can be this partner? I believe he wants to be. Whether he succeeds depends on whether you're willing to teach him. You have knowledge he doesn't have. He has resources you need. But this only works if you build it together, as equals, not as a corporation absorbing a family business. Marco was quiet again. When he spoke, his voice was thoughtful. You are very different from the people Mr. Carlisle usually employs. I'm a waitress who studied art history. I don't usually work for billionaires, but I know what it's like to fight for something you love while everyone tells you it's not practical or profitable. And I know what it's like to need help, but be too proud to accept it from the wrong people. You speak very directly, Ms. Bennett. My father used to say that courtesy without honesty is just manipulation in nice clothing. I'm trying to be both courteous and honest. She heard something that might have been a laugh. Your Italian is excellent. Where did you study? Columbia, as I mentioned. But I also spent a summer in Siena working in museum archives. Your country taught me that some things are worth preserving even when they're not efficient. What was your research about? The relationship between craft guilds and artistic innovation in Renaissance Florence. How tradition and creativity supported each other instead of conflicting. Claire glanced at Ethan, who was watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. I never finished my degree. My parents died and I had other responsibilities. But I still believe in the work. That is a great loss, Marco said quietly. Both for you and for scholarship. Thank you. But right now, Mr. Giordano, the question isn't about my unfinished research. It's about your company's future. And I'm asking you, not for Mr. Carlyle's sake, but for the sake of everyone who works in your workshops, to consider meeting with us one more time. Not in a restaurant, not with lawyers. Just the three of us talking honestly about what's possible. The silence this time felt different. Weighted. Claire held her breath. I am flying back to Florence this afternoon, Marco said finally. My son and I have meetings scheduled tomorrow. Claire's heart sank. I understand. However, Marco paused. If Mr. Carlyle is willing to come to Florence to see our workshops and meet our artisans, I will consider continuing this conversation, not as a negotiation, as an education. Claire translated for Ethan, whose eyes widened. He wants me to fly to Florence? When? When can you come? Claire asked Marco in Italian. We have a production review scheduled for Wednesday afternoon. If Mr. Carlyle arrives Tuesday evening, he can observe our processes firsthand. Then we will discuss whether his vision and ours can exist in the same company. Claire looked at Ethan. He's offering you a chance, but you have to come to him. You have to see the work. You have to learn what you're actually asking to be part of. Ethan didn't hesitate. Tell him I'll be there Tuesday evening. Claire relayed the message. Marco gave her the workshop address and his personal contact information. When they hung up, Claire's hands were shaking. We got the meeting, she said quietly. Ethan was staring at her like she'd just performed magic. You got the meeting. I was ready to give up after 2 minutes, and you turned the whole conversation around. I told him the truth. You told him the truth. That's all we did. No. Ethan shook his head. You did something else. You connected with him. You made him see you as a person, not just a voice on the phone. How did you do that? I didn't do anything special. I just talked to him the way I'd want someone to talk to me if I was protecting something I loved. Claire started gathering her notes, suddenly exhausted. The adrenaline was wearing off and reality was crashing back. She still had a shift at Luminaire tonight, still had Matteo's medication to pick up, still had a life that didn't include flying to Florence with billionaires. Claire, Ethan's voice stopped her. Come with me. She looked up. What? To Florence. Come with me. I can't do this without you. Mr. Carlyle, I'm a waitress and a translator, not a business consultant. You don't need me for, I need exactly you. Ethan moved around the desk, his intensity focused entirely on her now. You just saved a deal that 3 lawyers and 2 professional negotiators couldn't fix. You speak the language, you understand the culture, and Marco already trusts you more than he's ever trusted me. If I show up alone, I'm just another American businessman trying to learn enough to fake respect. But if you're there, if you're part of this, then it's real. I have a job. I have a brother who needs me. I can't just fly to Italy on 2 days' notice. I'll pay for everything. Flights, hotel, meals. I'll cover your lost wages from the restaurant, and I'll pay you $10,000 for the trip, plus the $50,000 if the deal closes. He paused. And I'll make sure Matteo has everything he needs while you're gone. Nurse care, medication delivery, whatever he requires. You won't have to worry about him. Claire felt the world tilt slightly. $10,000. $50,000 if the deal closed. Matteo taken care of. It was too much. It was exactly what she needed. It was terrifying. Why? She asked. Why do you need me specifically? Because you're the only person who's been honest with me in years. Because you care about the same things Marco cares about. Because you're not afraid to tell me when I'm wrong. And because Ethan stopped, something vulnerable crossing his face. Because I don't trust myself to do this right without someone there who actually gives a damn about more than just the money. Claire looked at this man who'd humiliated her 24 hours ago and was now asking her to fly across the world with him. It was insane. It was dangerous. It was the kind of offer that people like her didn't get, which meant it was probably too good to be true. But she thought about Mateo's medical bills. She thought about her abandoned thesis. She thought about spending the rest of her life bringing water glasses to people who didn't see her while her dreams gathered dust. I need to talk to my brother first, she said, and I need everything in writing. Contract, payment terms, all of it. Jennifer will have a contract ready in an hour. What else? I need you to promise me something. Claire met his eyes. If we go to Florence and this doesn't work, if Marco says no and the deal dies, you don't blame me. You don't get angry. You accept that some things can't be forced, no matter how much money you throw at them. Ethan nodded slowly. I promise. Then I'll go. The words left her mouth before she could second-guess them. But Mr. Carlyle, I'm going as your cultural consultant and translator, not your employee. That means you listen to me. You take my advice seriously. You don't override me because you think you know better. Agreed? Agreed. Ethan held out his hand. Partners? Claire hesitated, then shook his hand. His grip was firm, warm. Partners, for this one deal. Then we're done. Then we're done, Ethan echoed. But something in his eyes suggested he didn't quite believe that anymore. Neither did Claire. The morning disappeared into contracts and logistics. Jennifer produced paperwork with terrifying efficiency. Claire read every word twice before signing. The payment terms were real. The travel arrangements were first class. The care plan for Mateo included a private nursing service that cost more per day than Claire made in a week. She called Mateo during lunch, sitting in an empty conference room with takeout she was too nervous to eat. You're going to Italy? Her brother's voice was scratchy over the phone, thick with sleep and medication. Like, actually Italy? Florence, for 3 days. There's a nursing service coming by twice a day to help with your meds and physical therapy. Claire, I'm 19, not 9. I can handle myself for 3 days. You forgot to take your muscle relaxant twice last week. Because they make me sleep 14 hours, and I had that paper due. Mateo coughed, and Claire heard him shift position. Seriously, though, are you okay? This sounds kind of insane. You met this guy yesterday. It is insane, but it's also $60,000 if it works out. That's a year of medical bills, Mateo. That's your surgery fund. That's That's you getting a life again instead of just surviving. Her brother's voice went soft. Claire, I love you, but you've been killing yourself for 8 years taking care of me. If this crazy billionaire wants to pay you to go to Italy and translate stuff, you should go. Even if the money falls through, at least you'll have seen Florence. Claire felt her throat tighten. You're supposed to be the irresponsible one. I'm supposed to be the practical one who says no to things. Yeah, well, maybe it's time we both tried something different. Go to Italy. Help the billionaire. Try not to fall in love with him because that seems like a disaster waiting to happen. I'm not going to fall in love with him. He's arrogant and controlling and possibly emotionally damaged. So, exactly your type. I don't have a type. I don't have time for a type. Which is exactly why you should go to Italy. Mateo yawned. Look, I'm going back to sleep. You do your thing. Try the pasta. Don't let the billionaire be a jerk to Italian people. Call me when you land. I love you, Claire said. Love you too. Now go pack before you overthink this and change your mind. He hung up. Claire sat in the conference room holding her phone, trying to convince herself this was actually happening. Through the window, she could see Ethan in his office, talking on the phone, gesturing with his free hand. He looked different than he had last night. Less aggressive, more uncertain. Like someone trying to figure out how to be a person instead of just a winning machine. Her phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. This is Jennifer. Your flight leaves tomorrow at 6 p.m. from JFK. Car service will pick you up at 3. Mr. Carlyle wanted me to tell you to pack for business meetings, but also comfortable shoes for workshop tours. Also, he said thank you. Claire stared at the message. Tomorrow. She was going to Florence tomorrow. with a man she barely knew, to save a deal she didn't fully understand, for more money than she'd made in 3 years of waiting tables. She typed back, "Tell him he's welcome, and tell him I expect him to actually listen to Marco instead of just pretending to." Jennifer's response came immediately. "I will pass that along. Between you and me, Ms. Bennett, it's good that you're going. He needs someone who isn't afraid of him." Claire smiled despite herself. Then she gathered her things and headed back to Brooklyn to pack for a trip that would either change her life or destroy it. She wasn't sure which scared her more. The next 30 hours blurred together in a chaos of preparation. Claire worked her last shift at Luminaire, endured the manager's suspicious questions about her sudden vacation, and packed a suitcase with clothes that she hoped looked professional enough for Italian business meetings. She met with the nursing service, went over Matteo's medication schedule 3 times, and tried not to think about how much could go wrong. Tuesday afternoon arrived too fast. The car service showed up at exactly 3 p.m., a black sedan with a driver who called her Ms. Bennett and loaded her worn suitcase into the trunk like it was expensive luggage. The drive to JFK was smooth, surreal, completely disconnected from her normal life. Ethan was already at the airport, waiting in the first-class lounge. He'd ditched the suit for dark jeans and a casual button-down, and for the first time since she'd met him, he looked almost human. Tired, but human. "You came," he said when he saw her. "You keep saying that like you expected me to bail." "I half expected you to realize this was crazy and change your mind." "It is crazy, but I'm here anyway." Claire set down her bag. "Are you ready for this? Really ready, not just saying you are?" Ethan looked at her for a long moment. "I don't know. I've been trying to figure out what I'm going to say to Marco when I see those workshops. How do I look at 90 years of tradition and explain why I think I should be part of it?" "You don't explain. You listen. You watch. You learn." Claire sat down, exhausted already, and they hadn't even boarded yet. "Mr. Carlyle, can I ask you something?" "Ethan? If we're flying to Italy together, you should probably call me Ethan." "Okay, Ethan, why do you actually do this? Build companies, make deals, fight with your board? What's the point of all of it?" He was quiet for a long time. Outside the lounge windows, planes taxied past, carrying people to destinations all over the world. Everyone going somewhere, everyone running toward or away from something. "When Sarah died," Ethan said finally, "James was 2 years old. I was 29. I had no idea how to be a single father and run a company at the same time. So I split myself in half. There was work Ethan, who was ruthless and efficient and never stopped moving, and there was home Ethan, who was drowning and terrified and completely out of his depth. I thought if I could just be successful enough, make enough money, build something big enough, then maybe I could give James the kind of life that made up for losing his mother." "Did it work?" "No, he barely knows me. I'm just the guy who shows up between business trips and tries to buy his affection with expensive toys." Ethan rubbed his face. "I'm doing to him exactly what my father did to me, and I hate it, but I don't know how to stop." Claire felt something shift in her chest. "You stop by stopping. You don't need a perfect plan. You just need to decide that being present matters more than being successful." "That's terrifying." "Yeah, most important things are." She paused. "For what it's worth, the fact that you're aware of the problem means you're already different from your father. Awareness is the first step. What's the second step? Actually changing, which is the hard part." Claire looked at him seriously. "Ethan, I need you to understand something. This trip to Florence, this deal with Marco, it's not just about saving your company's expansion, it's about whether you can actually become the person you want to be. If you go there and fall back into your old patterns, if you treat this like just another acquisition to win, then nothing changes. You'll close the deal or you won't, but either way, you'll still be the same person who destroyed Hendrik and ignored Michael's calls." "And if I actually change, then maybe you save more than just the deal. Maybe you save yourself." She smiled slightly. "No pressure, though." Ethan laughed, surprised. "You're brutal, you know that?" "I'm honest. There's a difference." Their flight was called. They boarded together, settled into seats that Claire tried not to think about the cost of, and somewhere over the Atlantic Ocean, as Ethan worked on his laptop and Claire pretended to read the book she'd brought, she realized something unsettling. She was starting to like him. Not trust him, not yet, but like him. This version of him, anyway, the one who admitted he was scared, who talked about his son with guilt and love tangled together, who was trying so hard to be better, even though he had no idea how. It was dangerous, this liking. It made her vulnerable. It made her want to believe he could actually change, which was the kind of hope that got people hurt. But somewhere over the dark ocean, with nothing below them but water and nothing ahead but uncertainty, Claire decided to let herself hope anyway. Just this once, just for 3 days. Then she'd go back to her real life and forget she'd ever believed a billionaire could become human. They landed in Florence at 9 a.m. local time, both of them exhausted and wired on bad airplane coffee. The city unfolded beneath them as they descended, terracotta roofs, the Duomo rising like a promise, the Arno River cutting through centuries of history. Claire pressed her face to the window like a child, and when she looked over, Ethan was watching her instead of the view. "What?" she asked. "Nothing. You just look happy. I've never been to Italy. I spent 3 years studying it and never had the money to actually come here." She turned back to the window. "It's smaller than I imagined. More real." The driver Marco had arranged met them at baggage claim, an older man named Paolo, who spoke minimal English but smiled when Claire thanked him in Italian. The drive into the city was a blur of narrow streets and sudden piazzas, morning light turning everything golden. Their hotel was near the Ponte Vecchio, a converted palazzo that probably cost more per night than Claire's monthly rent. "We have 3 hours before we're supposed to be at the workshop," Ethan said as they checked in. "You should rest." "I'm too anxious to rest. I'm going to walk around, clear my head." "I'll come with you." Claire looked at him, surprised. "You don't have calls to make? Emails to answer?" "Probably hundreds, but you were right on the plane. I need to learn how to be present instead of always working." He shrugged, awkward. "Also, I don't speak Italian, and I'll probably get lost immediately." They left their bags and walked out into Florence. The city was already alive, tourists clustering around the Duomo, locals hurrying to work, the smell of espresso and fresh bread drifting from cafes. Claire led them across the Ponte Vecchio, past jewelry shops that had occupied the same spaces for generations, and Ethan was quiet, just watching. "Tell me about your research," he said finally. "The stuff you didn't finish." Claire glanced at him. "Why?" "Because I want to know. And because you've spent 2 days learning everything about my life, and I don't know anything about yours except that you have a sick brother and you're too smart to be waiting tables." "I'm not too smart for anything. Plenty of smart people wait tables." "You know what I mean?" They stopped at a small cafe near the Palazzo Pitti. Claire ordered 2 espressos in Italian, and they sat at a tiny table on the sidewalk, watching Florence wake up. "I was studying how craft guilds in Renaissance Florence balanced tradition with innovation," Claire said. "How they managed to preserve techniques while also allowing individual artists to experiment and create new forms. Everyone thinks tradition and creativity are opposites, but in Florence they weren't. They supported each other. The guilds provided structure and knowledge, and artists used that foundation to build something new. Like what Marco's trying to do with Giordano. Exactly like that. He wants to keep the traditional methods alive while finding ways to make them relevant to modern markets. But every investor who approaches him treats tradition like a liability instead of an asset. They want to gut the company and keep the name, which completely defeats the purpose." Ethan drank his espresso slowly. "And that's what I was trying to do." "Yes. But you think there's another way?" "I think there has to be. Otherwise, companies like Giordano just die, and all that knowledge dies with them. And 50 years from now, everything is manufactured in identical factories, and nobody remembers how to make anything beautiful by hand." Claire set down her cup. "Sorry, I get intense about this." "Don't apologize. It's the most passion I've heard from you about anything." Ethan leaned forward. "So tell me, if you were designing this deal, what would it look like?" "You're serious?" "Completely. You understand what Marco values. You understand the history. You understand what makes Giordano actually worth $900 million instead of just being an expensive name. So forget what my lawyers proposed. What would you propose?" Claire thought for a moment, watching an old woman walk past with a shopping bag, moving with the confidence of someone who knew every stone in these streets. "I'd create a partnership structure instead of an acquisition," she said slowly. "Carlyle Capital provides investment and distribution networks. But the Giordano family retains creative control and operational independence. You help them expand into new markets without changing their production methods. You build a luxury segment of your portfolio that's explicitly about preserving craft traditions, and you market it that way. People will pay more for things that are genuinely handmade if you can prove the authenticity. That's not how we usually structure deals. I know, but this isn't a usual deal, is it? You're not just buying a company, you're trying to prove you've changed. That requires actually changing how you do business, not just changing your pitch. Ethan was quiet, his fingers drumming on the table. Claire could see him thinking, calculating, weighing her words against everything he'd learned about corporate strategy and shareholder value. My board will hate it, he said finally. They want full control. They want to be able to make operational decisions without consulting the Giordanos on every detail. Then maybe this isn't the right deal for your board. Maybe this is the deal where you decide what matters more, keeping your board happy or actually building something worth building. You make it sound simple. It's not simple at all. It's terrifying. But simple and easy aren't the same thing. Claire checked her phone. We should head to the workshop. It's almost noon. They walked back to the hotel, got the car, and Paolo drove them out of the city center toward the hills. The workshop was in an old stone building that had probably been there for centuries, surrounded by olive groves and cypress trees. Claire's heart was pounding as they pulled up. Marco was waiting outside, his son Alessandro beside him. Both men were in work clothes, simple pants and shirts, their hands already showing the day's labor. Marco's face was neutral, giving nothing away. Mr. Carlyle, Miss Bennett, welcome to Florence. Marco's English was careful, formal. He shook their hands. You are on time. This is good. Come. I will show you what we do here. They followed him inside. The workshop smelled like leather and oil and generations of work. The main room was large and bright, with tall windows letting in afternoon sun. Workbenches lined the walls, and at each bench an artisan sat focused on their task, cutting, stitching, dyeing, finishing. Some were old, their hands moving with the muscle memory of decades. Some were young, still learning, their movements more careful. We employ 43 people here, Marco said, walking them through slowly. Some have been with us for 30 years, some started last month, but all of them are learning the same techniques my grandfather learned in 1935. Nothing has changed in our methods. Nothing needs to change. Ethan watched a woman hand-stitching the edge of a leather bag, her needle moving in tiny, precise loops. How long does it take to make one bag? This particular design? Approximately 60 hours of work. Cutting the leather, preparing the edges, stitching, finishing, quality control. 60 hours for one bag. And you're selling them for 1,200 euros retail. We make perhaps 300 of this style per year. Claire could see Ethan doing the math, see him calculating labor costs against revenue, see the part of his brain that lived in spreadsheets trying to make sense of economics that didn't fit his usual models. That's not sustainable, Ethan said quietly. The margins are too thin. You're paying master craftspeople for 60 hours of work and only charging— We are not charging for hours, Marco interrupted, his voice sharp. We are charging for knowledge, for quality, for the fact that this bag will last 30 years while your factory-made bags fall apart in 3. Our customers understand this. They pay for permanence, not convenience. But your sales are declining. Yes, because people no longer value permanence. They want cheap things they can replace. Marco's jaw tightened. This is why I'm reluctant to partner with someone like you, Mr. Carlyle. You see inefficiency where I see mastery. You see slow production where I see care. We are speaking different languages. Claire stepped in before the conversation could derail. Mr. Giordano, may I ask, what's your biggest challenge right now? Not philosophically, practically. Marco looked at her, some of the tension leaving his shoulders. Distribution. We sell through small boutiques in our own shop in Florence. But the boutiques are closing because of online retail, and tourists are the only ones who visit our shop. We cannot reach the customers who would value our work because we cannot compete with companies that spend millions on marketing. What if you had access to that marketing? Claire asked. What if you could reach customers all over the world who specifically want handmade traditional goods? What if someone helped you tell your story to people who will pay for genuine craftsmanship? This is what Mr. Carlyle promised before. Then he wanted to change everything we do. Because we were solving the wrong problem, Ethan said. Claire glanced at him, surprised. He was looking at Marco directly now. No defensiveness, no corporate smoothness. I was trying to make your company profitable by my standards instead of figuring out how to make your actual business model work better. That was my mistake. Marco studied him for a long moment. Come, I want to show you something. He led them to the back of the workshop where an older man sat at a bench working on a leather belt. His hands were gnarled, spotted with age, but they moved with absolute certainty as he carved a pattern into the leather. This is Stefano, Marco said. He has worked here for 41 years. He learned from my father. Before my father died, he made me promise something, that I would never sacrifice our people for profit, that I would protect the knowledge they carry. Every person in this room knows things that cannot be written in manuals or taught in schools. They learn by watching, by doing, by failing, and trying again. If we fire them and replace them with machines, that knowledge dies. Forever. Ethan watched Stefano work, and Claire saw something shift in his face. Not calculation this time, recognition. My father built his first company from nothing, Ethan said quietly. He was a carpenter, made custom furniture for rich people in Connecticut. He taught me how to use a lathe when I was 8 years old. I hated it. It was hard and tedious, and my hands hurt. But he said the same thing you just said. He said some knowledge only lives in people's hands, and if you don't pass it on, it disappears. What happened to his company? Marco asked. He sold it when I was in college. Took the money and retired. The new owners turned it into a furniture store that sells imported stuff from overseas. All the craftsmen he employed found other work or retired. The knowledge he was so proud of just dissolved. Ethan's voice was rough. I became exactly what killed my father's company. I just didn't realize it until now. The workshop was quiet except for the ambient sounds of work. Leather being cut, needles pulling thread, the soft conversations of artisans helping each other solve problems. Marco said something in Italian to Alessandro, too quick for Ethan to catch. Alessandro nodded and left. Marco turned back to them. Ms. Bennett, you told me on the phone that Mr. Carlyle wanted to prove he had changed. I did not believe you. I thought this was another performance, another way to manipulate me into accepting bad terms. He paused. But I see something different now. I see a man who is remembering who he was before he became successful. This is good. This is necessary. Does that mean you're willing to negotiate? Claire asked, hardly daring to hope. It means I am willing to listen. But Mr. Carlyle, you must understand, I will not compromise on our methods. I will not fire our people. I will not turn 90 years of craft into a brand that exists only on paper. If you cannot accept this, we are wasting each other's time. I accept it, Ethan said immediately. I don't just accept it. I want to protect it. I want to build something where craftsmanship like this is valued instead of eliminated. I want my son to grow up in a world where people still know how to make things that last. Marco's expression softened slightly. You have a son? James, he's 5. I'm a terrible father. I'm never home. I'm always working. I've been so focused on building the company that I've forgotten to actually be present in his life. Ethan's voice cracked slightly. Sarah, my wife, she would have been good at this. She would have known how to balance everything. But she died, and I didn't. And I've been running so hard from the grief that I've lost sight of what actually matters. Claire felt her throat tighten. This wasn't the speech of a man trying to close a deal. This was the speech of a man falling apart in the best possible way. Alessandro returned carrying a worn leather portfolio. He handed it to Marco, who opened it carefully and pulled out old photographs. This is my grandfather in 1935, Marco said, showing them a picture of a young man in a workshop much smaller than this one. He was 23 years old. He had no money, no education, just his hands and his father's training. Everyone told him he was foolish to start a business making luxury goods during hard economic times. But he believed that people would always need beautiful things, even in darkness, especially in darkness. The next photo showed the same man, older now, teaching a young boy, Marco himself, Claire realized, how to work a piece of leather. He told me that our job was not to make money, Marco continued. Our job was to make things so beautiful and so well crafted that they reminded people what humans could create when they cared about their work. Money would follow if we did this honestly. And he was right. We survived wars, recessions, fashion changes, everything, because we never compromised on quality. I want to help you continue that, Ethan said. Not change it, continue it. Marco looked at him for a long moment. Then he said something that surprised both of them. Tomorrow morning, you will work here. Both of you. You will learn what we do. You will use your hands. You will understand the time and skill required. Then, if you still want to partner with us, we will talk about terms. Claire's eyes widened. You want us to actually make leather goods? I want you to try. You will fail, of course, but failing will teach you respect for the people who succeed. Marco almost smiled. Come at 7 in the morning, wear clothes you don't mind ruining, and Miss Bennett, your Italian is excellent, but tomorrow you will learn our dialect. The workshop has its own language. They left an hour later after Marco showed them the rest of the facility and introduced them to more artisans. The drive back to Florence was quiet. Claire kept replaying the conversation, trying to process what had just happened. That went better than I expected, she said finally. He's testing us, Ethan replied. He wants to see if we're serious or if we'll give up the minute the work gets hard. Are you serious? I don't know how to hand-stitch leather. I'll probably be terrible at it. That's not what I asked. Ethan looked out the window at the Tuscan countryside rolling past. I spent 7 years building a company by being ruthless and efficient. And I was good at it. I made a lot of money. I won a lot of negotiations. But sitting in that workshop, watching those people make things that will outlast all of us, I realized I haven't built anything permanent. I've just moved money around and called it success. So what are you going to do? I'm going to show up tomorrow at 7 and ruin whatever piece of leather they give me. And then I'm going to figure out how to actually help them instead of just acquiring them. He turned to look at her. Thank you for pushing me to do this, for not letting me take the easy way out. You're welcome, but Ethan, you need to know, even if you do everything right, this might not work. Marco might still say no. The economics might not make sense. Your board might revolt. You could lose everything you've built trying to do this differently. I know. He smiled slightly, and it was the first real smile she'd seen from him. Terrifying, right? Completely. They had dinner that night at a small restaurant near their hotel, sitting outside and watching Florence turn blue in the twilight. Claire ordered in Italian, translating for Ethan, and they talked about things that had nothing to do with business. James's obsession with dinosaurs, Matteo's dreams of becoming a physical therapist despite his own disability, the way grief changed shape over time, but never really disappeared. Do you ever regret dropping out of Columbia? Ethan asked. Every day, but I also don't regret taking care of Matteo. Both things are true at the same time. Claire drank her wine slowly. I used to think I had to choose. Either I was a scholar or I was a sister. Either I pursued my dreams or I fulfilled my responsibilities. But that's a false choice. I'm both. I just haven't figured out how to make both things fit in one life yet. What if you could finish your degree? I can't afford to go back to school. Even if I could, I have bills to pay now. It's not realistic. What if someone paid for it? Claire looked at him sharply. Don't. Don't what? Don't try to fix my life because you feel guilty about yours. I'm not a project, Ethan. I'm not something you can throw money at to feel better about yourself. That's not what I'm doing, isn't it? You barely know me. And now you're talking about paying for my education because what? You think I'm wasting my potential because you need to believe you can save someone to make up for all the people you've hurt? Claire set down her glass. I appreciate the thought, but I don't need saving. I need to save myself. Ethan was quiet for a long time. You're right. I'm sorry. That was out of line. It's okay. I know you meant well. No, it's not okay. You just called me out for doing exactly what I've been doing my whole life, trying to control things by throwing money at them. I did it with my marriage, with James, with every relationship I've ever had. I don't know how to just be with people without trying to fix them. Then maybe that's what you should work on. Instead of trying to save me or Marco or anyone else, maybe you should focus on becoming someone who doesn't need to save people to feel valuable. The words hung in the air between them. Claire expected him to get defensive, to shut down, to revert to the arrogant billionaire who'd humiliated her in that restaurant. Instead, he laughed. A real laugh, surprised and a little broken. You're brutal. I'm honest. You keep forgetting there's a difference. They finished dinner in easier silence. Walking back to the hotel, the streets were quiet, just the sound of their footsteps on ancient cobblestones. The Arno River reflected streetlights, and somewhere a church bell was ringing. "Claire," Ethan said as they reached the hotel entrance, "tomorrow, at the workshop, if I start slipping back into my old patterns, if I start trying to control things or treat this like a transaction, will you tell me?" "Of course. Even if it's in front of Marco and Alessandro? Especially then. You hired me to keep you honest, remember? I hired you to translate. Same thing, in this case." She smiled. "Get some sleep. 7 a.m. is going to come early." They said goodnight in the lobby. Claire went up to her room, which was absurdly beautiful. Frescoed ceilings, a balcony overlooking the river, furniture that was probably worth more than everything she owned. She stood on the balcony for a long time, looking out at Florence, trying to understand what was happening. 3 days ago, she'd been a waitress with no prospects and crushing debt. Now she was in Italy, consulting on a $900 million deal, watching a billionaire slowly remember how to be human. It didn't feel real. It felt like something that would dissolve when she woke up, revealed as just another exhausted fantasy. Her phone buzzed. A text from Matteo. "How's Italy? Did you eat all the pasta yet?" Claire smiled and typed back. "Haven't had time. Too busy trying to teach a billionaire about humility." Matteo. "How's that going?" Claire. "Better than expected, worse than I hoped. Somewhere in between." Matteo. "Deep, very philosophical, very Italy. Seriously, though, are you okay?" Claire thought about the question. Was she okay? She was exhausted, overwhelmed, completely out of her depth. But she was also alive in a way she hadn't been in years. She was using her brain for something other than memorizing drink orders. She was speaking Italian again. She was watching someone change in real time, and maybe helping them change. And that felt important in a way that transcended money or career or anything practical. "Yes," she typed back. "I'm okay. Better than okay, actually. I'm remembering who I used to be before everything fell apart." Matteo. "Good. You deserve that. Now go to sleep so you can save the world tomorrow." Claire. "Just trying to save one deal. The world can wait." Matteo. "Start small, conquer everything later. That's the Bennett family motto." Claire. "Since when do we have a family motto?" Matteo. "Since right now. I just made it up. Pretty good, right?" Claire laughed, the sound surprising her. "Love you," she texted. "Love you more," he sent back. "Now seriously, sleep. You sound punchy." She put down her phone and went to bed. Tomorrow she'd be hand-stitching leather and probably humiliating herself in front of Italian craftsmen. Tomorrow, Ethan would either prove he could actually change or reveal that this whole thing was just another performance. Tomorrow everything could fall apart or come together or land somewhere messily in between. But tonight, Claire let herself believe that maybe, impossibly, this could actually work. And if it didn't, at least she'd seen Florence. At 6:45 the next morning, Paolo picked them up from the hotel. Ethan looked nervous, which was strangely reassuring. At least he understood the stakes. Claire had dressed in jeans and an old shirt, and she'd pulled her hair back in a practical ponytail. Work clothes. Real clothes. The workshop was already alive when they arrived. Artisans settling into their stations, the smell of coffee mixing with leather and morning air. Marco met them at the door with 2 heavy canvas aprons. "Good. You came. I was not certain you would." He handed them the aprons. "Today you will work with Giulia and Stefano. They will teach you basic edge finishing. It is simple work, but it requires patience and precision. Most people cannot do it properly even after months of practice." He led them to separate workbenches. Claire was paired with Giulia, a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and hands that moved like water. Ethan got Stefano, the old master they'd met yesterday. "Buongiorno," Giulia said, her Italian warm but rapid. "Marco says you studied our language. This is good. I do not speak English well. Now, watch carefully. I will show you only once." She demonstrated how to prepare the edge of a leather strap, beveling, sanding, burnishing. Her movements were economical, practiced, each gesture flowing into the next. Then she handed Claire a piece of scrap leather and a beveling tool. "Now, you try." Claire tried. The tool slipped, cut too deep. ruined the edge. Julia corrected her grip, her hands guiding Claire's, showing her the angle, the pressure, the rhythm. Claire tried again. Better, but still wrong. Again, Julia said. Across the room, Ethan was struggling even more. Claire could see Stefano patiently correcting his posture, his grip, his entire approach. Ethan's face was set in concentration, sweat already beading on his forehead despite the cool morning air. An hour passed. Claire's hands started to cramp. The repetitive motion was harder than it looked, required muscles she'd never used before. Julia worked beside her, maintaining her own project while monitoring Claire's attempts. "You think too much," Julia said in Italian. "Your brain is fighting your hands. Let your hands learn. Trust the motion." "How long did it take you to learn this?" Claire asked. 6 months before I could do it without ruining the leather. 2 years before I could do it well. 10 years before I stopped thinking about it." Julia smiled. "Everything worth doing takes time. Americans always want to be good immediately, but mastery is patient." At noon, Marco called to break. The artisans gathered in a courtyard behind the workshop where someone had set out bread, cheese, fruit, and wine. Claire's hands were sore and her back hurt from hunching over the workbench. Ethan looked worse. His fingers were actually bleeding slightly from gripping the tools too hard. "You're terrible at this," Marco said cheerfully, inspecting Ethan's work. "But you did not quit. This is good. I feel like I'm 7 years old again, learning to use my father's tools and failing at everything," Ethan admitted. "Good. Humility is the beginning of learning." Marco turned to Claire. "And you, Ms. Bennett? What did you learn this morning?" "That I know absolutely nothing about leatherwork and that every bag in your shop is a miracle." "Also good." Marco poured wine into small glasses and handed them around. "This afternoon you will continue. Tonight we will have dinner at my home. And tomorrow, if you still want to discuss partnership, we will talk seriously about terms." "We want to discuss partnership," Ethan said immediately. "Even after discovering how difficult our work is? Even after understanding that you cannot simply optimize it or speed it up or make it more efficient? Especially after understanding that." Ethan looked at his bleeding fingers, then at the artisans gathered around them, eating lunch and talking in rapid Italian. "Marco, I came here thinking I understood your business. I didn't. I understood the numbers, but I didn't understand the work. And the work is everything." "Yes," Marco said quietly. "The work is everything. Remember that tomorrow, when we negotiate. Remember that every euro you want to save is a person's livelihood. Every efficiency you want to create is knowledge you want to erase. If you can remember that, we can perhaps find a way forward." They worked through the afternoon. Claire's fingers developed small calluses. Ethan's bleeding stopped, but his movements stayed clumsy, uncertain. Julia and Stefano were patient, correcting and encouraging in equal measure. The other artisans glanced over occasionally, curious about these Americans who'd volunteered to fail at their craft. At 6 o'clock, Marco called an end to the workday. The artisans cleaned their stations with the same care they'd applied to their work. Nothing rushed, nothing careless. Claire watched them and understood something fundamental. This wasn't just a job to these people. It was a practice, almost spiritual in its attention and dedication. "How do you feel?" Julia asked as Claire hung up her apron. "Humbled, sore, grateful." "Good answers. Come back tomorrow if you want to try again." "Really? You have the patience for this work. Maybe not the skill yet, but skill can be taught. Patience cannot." Julia smiled. "Also, it is nice to teach someone who actually wants to learn instead of just wanting to say they learned." They drove to Marco's home as the sun was setting, the hills around Florence turning gold and purple. His house was modest, comfortable, filled with evidence of family life, photos, children's drawings, books in Italian and English mixed together on shelves. Marco's wife, Lucia, greeted them warmly and immediately began feeding them. Pasta, roasted vegetables, wine that Marco said came from a vineyard owned by his cousin. Alessandro was there with his girlfriend, and they all sat around a table that was clearly the heart of the house. The conversation flowed between Italian and English, everyone patient with translation, nobody rushing. They talked about everything except business, Alessandro's recent trip to Rome, Lucia's work teaching literature at a local school, the challenges of maintaining old buildings in a modern city. "You have a son?" Lucia asked Ethan during a lull in conversation. James. He's 5. And he is in New York while you are here? With his nanny. I call him every night, but it's not the same as being there. Ethan's voice was quiet. I'm not very good at balancing work and family. No one is good at this, Lucia said gently. We all fail constantly. The question is whether you keep trying or whether you give up and pretend work is enough. I've been pretending work is enough for a long time. And now? Now I'm trying to figure out how to stop pretending. Lucia nodded, satisfied. This is good. Children need fathers who are honest about their failures. Perfect fathers teach nothing useful. After dinner, Marco brought out grappa and they moved to the living room. Alessandro showed Claire photos of the workshop from decades ago, explaining how it had grown and changed while staying fundamentally the same. This is the challenge, Alessandro said in careful English. We must evolve without losing what makes us valuable. Every generation faces this. My grandfather did. My father does. I will. But investors do not understand. They see only the destination, not the journey. What if we protected the journey? Claire asked. What if the partnership explicitly guaranteed that your methods, your people, your pace of work all stayed under your control? Then what value does the partnership provide? Distribution, marketing, access to customers who will pay for genuine craft but don't know you exist. Financial stability so you can weather market changes without compromising quality. She looked at Ethan. And capital investment in training the next generation, more apprenticeships, better tools, workshops in other countries to spread the knowledge instead of hoarding it. Marco and Alessandro exchanged a look. Something passed between them, wordless communication born of years working side by side. Tomorrow, Marco said finally, we talk seriously. Miss Bennett, you will be part of these conversations. Your understanding is valuable. And Mr. Carlyle, tonight I want you to think carefully about what you actually want from this partnership. Not what your board wants, not what your investors want, what you want. Because if you cannot answer that question honestly, we have nothing to discuss. They left around 10, the night air cool and clean. In the car, Ethan was quiet, staring out the window at the dark hills. What do you want? Claire asked softly. From this deal, from your company, from your life. What do you actually want? Ethan took a long time to answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was rough. I want to build something James can be proud of. Not just financially successful, but actually meaningful. I want to prove that you can do business with integrity. And I want to stop being the kind of person who destroys beautiful things because I'm too afraid to protect them. That's a good answer. Is it enough? I don't know, but it's honest, and that's where everything starts. They rode the rest of the way in silence, and Claire realized something that terrified her. She was starting to believe in him. Not in some abstract way, not as a consultant believing in a client, but actually believing that Ethan Carlyle might become the person he was trying to be. And if he failed, if this all fell apart tomorrow, it would hurt in ways she hadn't expected. But it was too late to protect herself now. She'd already started hoping. The next morning arrived with the kind of clarity that made everything feel fragile. Claire woke early, her hands still sore from yesterday's work, and found a message from Ethan already waiting on her phone. Can't sleep, too nervous. Is that normal? She typed back, completely normal. It means you actually care about the outcome. His response came immediately. When did I become someone who gets nervous about business meetings? When you stopped treating them like transactions and started treating them like relationships, she wrote. Now, get some coffee and meet me in the lobby at 8. We need to talk strategy before we go to the workshop. They met over espresso in the hotel's breakfast room, both of them too anxious to eat much. Ethan had notes spread across the table, pages of handwritten thoughts that looked like they'd been drafted and redrafted multiple times. I worked on the proposal all night, he said, pushing the papers toward her. It's different from what my lawyers drew up. I don't know if Marco will accept it, but it's the most honest version I could come up with. Claire read through his notes. The structure was elegant in its simplicity. Carlyle Capital would provide capital investment and distribution networks, but the Giordano family would retain full operational control and creative authority. Profits would be shared based on a partnership model rather than an acquisition structure. Most importantly, there was a clause protecting the artisan workforce and traditional methods from any future changes in ownership or management. This is good, she said quietly. Really good. But Ethan, your board is going to fight you on this. They want control. This gives them almost none. I know. I'll deal with the board when we get back to New York. Right now, I need to focus on making this right with Marco. He rubbed his face, exhausted. Claire, what if he still says no? What if even this isn't enough? Then at least you tried to do it honestly, and that matters, even if it doesn't get you the outcome you want. She paused. But I don't think he's going to say no. I think he's been waiting for someone to approach his company this way for years. He just didn't believe it was possible until now. They arrived at the workshop at 9 o'clock as Marco had requested. This time, they weren't taken to the work floor. Instead, Marco led them to a small office at the back of the building. Simple furniture, walls covered with old photographs and design sketches, a window overlooking the olive groves. Alessandro was already there, along with an older woman Claire didn't recognize. "This is my mother, Bianca," Marco said. "She does not usually involve herself in business matters, but for a decision this important, I wanted her perspective. She built this company alongside my father for 40 years. Bianca Giordano was small, elegant, probably in her 70s. Her eyes were sharp as she shook their hands, assessing them with the kind of scrutiny that came from decades of judging character. "Sasim, sit," Marco said, gesturing to the chairs around a worn wooden table. "Mr. Carlyle, you said you wanted to discuss partnership. I am ready to listen, but first I have questions." "Of course." Marco leaned forward, his hands flat on the table. "What happens in 5 years when you decide this partnership is not profitable enough? When your board demands higher returns? When efficiency becomes more important than craft?" Ethan didn't hesitate. "There's a protection clause. If Carlyle Capital ever wants to alter the operational structure or workforce in ways that compromise your traditional methods, you have the right to buy back full ownership at the original investment price. You can't be forced to change. And who decides what compromises our methods? You do. Final authority stays with the Giordano family on all production decisions." Alessandro spoke up, his English more confident than his father's. "What about marketing, distribution? If we disagree about how our brand is presented to the world, we collaborate. But if there's a fundamental disagreement that can't be resolved, your vision wins. This is your legacy, not mine. I'm just trying to help you share it with more people." Bianca said something in rapid Italian to Marco. He nodded and turned back to Ethan. "My mother asks why we should trust you. You are very good at saying the right things now, but words are easy. Actions are what matter. How do we know you will not become like the other investors who promised respect and delivered control?" Claire watched Ethan carefully. This was the moment. He could give them corporate reassurances, legal guarantees, all the professional mechanisms designed to create trust through contracts. Or he could give them the truth. "You don't know," Ethan said finally. "I can write the protections into the contract. I can make legal promises that would cost me millions to break. But ultimately, you're taking a risk on me. And the only thing I can offer you is my word that I understand what I almost destroyed, and I won't let it happen again." "Your word," Marco repeated slowly. "My word. And my actions. I'm restructuring how Carlyle Capital approaches legacy companies, creating a new division specifically focused on preservation partnerships instead of acquisitions. Hiring people who understand craft and tradition, not just finance. Your company would be the first, but not the last. I want to prove that you can build a profitable business while protecting what makes these companies valuable in the first place." Bianca spoke again in Italian, longer this time. Claire caught most of it, something about trust being earned through time, about her husband's vision, about the responsibility of protecting workers who had given their lives to the company. "My mother says that my father would have liked you," Marco translated. "Not because you are perfect, but because you are honest about your imperfections. He always said the most dangerous people in business were those who believed they were already right about everything." "I've been that person," Ethan admitted. "I'm trying not to be anymore." Marco and Alessandro exchanged another one of those wordless looks. Then Alessandro pulled out a folder and spread papers across the table. Financial statements, production reports, market analysis. "We have prepared our own proposal," Alessandro said, "based on conversations with our workers, our suppliers, and our family. These are our terms, non-negotiable." Claire leaned forward to read, translating the Italian sections for Ethan. The terms were fair but firm. Carlyle Capital would invest 30 million euros over 3 years, with funds specifically allocated for artisan training programs, equipment upgrades that enhanced rather than replaced hand methods, and international marketing. The Giordano family would retain 60% ownership and full operational control. Profit sharing would begin after the initial investment was recouped. These terms give you very little control, Ethan said, reading through the proposal. Yes, Marco agreed, because we do not want a partner who needs control. We want a partner who trusts us to run our own company while providing resources we cannot access alone. My board will fight this. Then you must decide what matters more, your board or your word. The room went quiet. Outside, Claire could hear the sounds of the workshop, leather being worked, quiet conversations, the ambient noise of creation. Everything in this moment hinged on what Ethan said next. He looked at the proposal for a long time. Claire could see him thinking, calculating, weighing everything he'd built against everything he was trying to become. His phone buzzed, probably Jennifer with some urgent New York crisis, but he ignored it. I accept your terms, Ethan said finally. All of them. And I'll handle my board. Marco's face didn't change, but something shifted in his eyes. Relief, maybe. Or hope. You understand this means you are truly our partner, not our owner. We will make decisions you disagree with. We will move slower than you want. We will prioritize tradition over profit sometimes. I understand, and I'm okay with that. Ethan looked at Claire, then back to Marco. I didn't come to Florence to acquire your company. I came to learn what it means to build something that lasts. If that means giving up control, then that's what I'll do. Bianca said something in Italian, her voice soft. Marco smiled slightly. My mother says you have learned well. She wants to know if Ms. Bennett will stay involved in the partnership. She says you need someone who understands both worlds, business and craft. Someone who can translate not just language, but vision. Claire felt everyone's eyes turn to her. I'm not a business consultant, she said carefully. I'm a translator and a researcher. I don't know anything about running a luxury goods partnership. You know about preserving tradition while encouraging innovation, Alessandro countered. That was your entire research focus, yes? This partnership needs exactly that knowledge. I have responsibilities in New York. My brother needs, we would compensate you appropriately, Marco said. This would not be occasional work. We would want you as a full-time consultant, splitting time between New York and Florence, learning our business, helping us communicate with American markets, ensuring that Mr. Carlyle's company understands our values. If you're interested. Claire looked at Ethan, who was watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. Did you know they were going to offer me this? No, but they're right. This partnership needs you. I need you. He paused. Not just for the translation, for the honesty, for keeping me from sliding back into old patterns. That's a lot of pressure to put on one person. I know. And I know you have your own life, your own responsibilities. But Claire, you care about this work. I saw it yesterday when you were learning from Julia. I heard it when you talked about your research. This is a chance to actually apply everything you studied, to help preserve exactly the kind of traditions you spent years researching. It was manipulation, and it was true at the same time. Claire felt the familiar pull, the dream she'd abandoned knocking on her door again, asking to be let back in. But dreams were expensive, and her life was complicated, and Matteo still needed her. I need time to think about it, she said, and I need to talk to my brother. This isn't a decision I can make alone. Of course, Marco said. Take your time, but know that we would be honored to work with you. You understand what we are trying to protect. That understanding is rare. They spent the rest of the morning working through details, timelines, investment schedules, marketing strategies. Claire translated and clarified, watching Ethan and Marco slowly build something that looked like actual trust. It wasn't smooth. They disagreed about market positioning, about pricing strategies, about how fast to expand. But they disagreed as partners, not as adversaries. Around noon, Marco stood up and stretched. Enough business for now. Alessandro will prepare the formal contracts for review. Tonight, we celebrate. Tomorrow, you fly home and begin the real work of partnership. But right now, we eat lunch. They walked to a small trattoria nearby, just the five of them, Marco, Alessandro, Bianca, Ethan, and Claire. The restaurant was clearly a regular spot for the Giordano family. The owner greeted them warmly and brought wine without being asked. To new partnerships, Marco said, raising his glass. and to the courage to try something different. They toasted. The wine was good, the food better, and for a while everything felt possible. Then Ethan's phone rang. He glanced at the screen and his face went pale. "I need to take this. Excuse me." He stepped outside, and through the window Claire could see him pacing, his free hand gesturing sharply. "Trouble?" Alessandro asked quietly. "Probably." His board wasn't happy about him coming here without their approval. I imagine they're even less happy about the terms he just agreed to. When Ethan came back inside 10 minutes later, his jaw was tight and his eyes were hard. He sat down heavily. "That was Harrison, my lead board member. He got wind of the partnership terms somehow." Ethan's voice was carefully controlled. "He's calling an emergency board meeting for Friday morning. He's bringing a motion to remove me as CEO." Claire's stomach dropped. "Can he do that?" "If he has enough votes, yes. He's been building a coalition for months, waiting for me to make a mistake big enough to justify it. Apparently, agreeing to a partnership where we don't have majority control qualifies." Ethan drank his wine in one swallow. "I'm sorry, Marco. I knew this would be difficult, but I didn't think they'd move this fast." Marco was quiet for a moment, thinking. "If you lose your position, what happens to our partnership?" "The deal dies. Harrison will kill it immediately and probably blacklist Giordano from any future Carlyle Capital investments out of spite. So we must make sure you do not lose." "That's not your problem. I made this choice. I'll deal with the consequences." "You made this choice for the right reasons," Bianca said firmly, her English accented but clear. "You do not abandon partners when they face difficulty. This is what partnership means. With respect, Mrs. Giordano, this is internal corporate politics. There's nothing you can do." "Perhaps not directly," Alessandro said, "but we are not without resources. We have relationships with luxury brands across Europe, many of whom have American retail operations. We have reputation. We have standing in our industry. If your board members understand that removing you means losing access to those networks, they might reconsider." Ethan looked at him, surprised. "You'd put your reputation on the line for a deal that isn't even finalized yet." "We are putting our reputation on the line for a partner who proved he could change. That is worth fighting for." Marco leaned forward. "Tell us what you need." The afternoon shifted into something Claire hadn't expected. Strategic planning, not about leather goods or craft preservation, but about corporate warfare. Marco made calls to contacts in luxury retail. Alessandro drafted statements about the partnership. Bianca reached out to old friends in European business circles. They were mobilizing their network to support Ethan, and watching them work, Claire understood something fundamental about the Giordano family. When they committed to something, they committed fully. By evening, the plan was clear. Marco would release a public statement about the partnership, emphasizing that Carlyle Capital had been chosen specifically because of Ethan's vision and integrity. Alessandro would reach out to 3 major luxury retailers who had existing relationships with both Giordano and Carlyle Capital, making it clear that those relationships would be strengthened by the partnership and damaged by Ethan's removal. And Bianca would personally call 2 board members she knew through her late husband's business connections, making the case for patience and trust. "This might not be enough," Ethan warned. "Harrison is well-connected and very persuasive, and some of the board members have been looking for an excuse to push me out for years." "Then we make it expensive for them to succeed," Marco said simply. "They must understand that you are not alone in this fight." They worked late into the night at the workshop, which had emptied of artisans but still smelled like leather and labor. Claire drafted press releases, translating between English and Italian, while Ethan made calls to New York and tried to shore up his support on the board. The situation was grim. Harrison had at least 4 confirmed votes, maybe 5. Ethan needed 7 to maintain his position. It was going to be close. Around midnight, Claire found Ethan standing alone in the main workshop, staring at the empty workbenches. "Taking a break?" she asked. "Trying to remember why I'm fighting so hard for this." He gestured around the room. 2 days ago, this was just another acquisition target. Now I'm risking my entire career to protect it. That should feel stupid, but it doesn't. Because it's not stupid. You're protecting something that matters. Harrison will say I'm being sentimental, that I'm letting emotion override business sense, that I'm prioritizing legacy over shareholder value. And what will you say back? That shareholder value is meaningless if we destroy everything valuable in pursuit of it. That legacy is what makes companies worth investing in. That I'm trying to build something my son won't be ashamed of. Ethan turned to face her. But I don't know if that's enough. The board doesn't care about legacy or ethics or any of it. They care about returns. Then make the business case. Show them that this partnership model can be profitable while being ethical. Show them the marketing value of being the company that preserves traditions instead of destroying them. Show them that doing the right thing can also be the smart thing. You make it sound simple. It's not simple, but it's possible. And you have people fighting for you now. That has to count for something. Ethan looked at her for a long moment, something vulnerable in his expression. Claire, when this is over, whether I win or lose, I want you to know that you changed something in me. You made me remember that there are things more important than winning, and I'm grateful for that, regardless of how this turns out. Claire felt something tighten in her chest. Dangerous territory, this. She was supposed to be the consultant, the translator, the person who kept professional distance. She wasn't supposed to care this much about whether he succeeded or failed. You changed something in yourself, she said quietly. I just witnessed it. Don't give me credit for your own growth. I'm going to anyway. They stood in the quiet workshop, the space between them charged with something neither of them was ready to name. Then Claire's phone buzzed, breaking the moment. A text from Matteo. How's Italy? Are you saving the world yet? She smiled despite the tension. Not yet. Still working on saving one deal. How are you? Good. Nursing service is actually pretty great. They brought me better medication and showed me some new exercises. I feel like a fancy rich person. You deserve to feel fancy. She hesitated, then added, Matteo, what if I told you I might have a job offer? Full-time, splitting time between New York and Florence, doing research and consulting work. Good money, but it would mean a lot of travel. His response came quickly. I tell you to take it immediately and stop asking permission to have a life. It's not that simple. I need you to stop sacrificing everything for me. Claire, I'm 19. I can manage. You've been putting your life on hold for 8 years. If this job is what you want, take it, please. Claire felt tears prick her eyes. What did I do to deserve you? You raised me after Mom and Dad died. You gave up your dreams so I could have a future. You've earned the right to dream again. Now stop being noble and go live your life. She showed the messages to Ethan, who read them and smiled slightly. Smart kid. The smartest. He's going to be a better person than either of us. That's not a high bar to clear. Ethan's phone buzzed. Another crisis. Another fire to put out. I should get back to damage control. But Claire, think about Marco's offer. Really think about it. Because this partnership needs someone who understands what we're trying to build. And that's you. The next day passed in a blur of preparation and anxiety. Marco's statement went public, generating immediate buzz in luxury retail circles. Alessandro's calls yielded cautious support. The retailers wanted to see how the board vote went before committing fully. Bianca's conversations with board members were polite but non-committal. Everything was balanced on a knife's edge. They flew back to New York that evening, Ethan buried in his laptop the entire flight, preparing for Friday's meeting. Claire tried to sleep but couldn't stop thinking about everything that could go wrong. They landed at JFK at 11 p.m. local time. Jennifer met them at the airport, her face drawn with stress. It's bad, she said without preamble. Harrison's been working the board hard. He's got 5 confirmed votes, maybe 6. And he's threatening to leak the Hendricks story to the business press if you don't step down voluntarily. Let him, Ethan said. I'm not stepping down. Ethan, if that story breaks, it'll destroy your reputation. Every deal you've ever made will be re-examined. Shareholders will panic. Then I'll own it. I'll tell the truth about what happened and what I learned from it. But I won't let Harrison use my past mistakes to kill something good. Jennifer looked at Claire, desperate for support. Can you talk sense into him? He is making sense, Claire said. Sometimes the right thing and the smart thing are the same thing. You just have to be brave enough to do it. The car ride to Manhattan was tense. Ethan dropped Claire at her apartment in Brooklyn, promising to call her after the board meeting tomorrow. Good luck, she said as she got out. And Ethan, whatever happens, you did the right thing. Remember that. He nodded, but his face was set with worry. The car pulled away and Claire climbed the stairs to her apartment, feeling the weight of everything settle on her shoulders. Matteo was still awake, playing video games on the couch. He looked up when she came in, his face breaking into a grin. "You're back! How was Italy? Did you save the billionaire?" "I don't know yet. Ask me tomorrow after his board tries to fire him." "That's dramatic. I like it." Matteo paused his game. "Seriously, though, are you okay? You look exhausted." "I am exhausted, but I'm also more alive than I've been in years." Claire sat down next to him. "Matteo, they offered me a job. Good money, meaningful work, a chance to actually use my degree. But it means a lot of travel. Are you really okay with that?" "Claire, I'm going to be okay whether you take the job or not. The question is whether you're okay with it. Do you want this job?" She thought about this workshop in Florence, about Julia's patient teaching, about watching Marco and Ethan build something new and fragile and important. She thought about her abandoned thesis, about years of research gathering dust, about the possibility of doing work that actually mattered. "Yes," she said quietly. "I want it. I'm terrified of it, but I want it." "Then take it, and stop being terrified. You're brilliant and capable, and you've been wasting your brain on water glasses for too long. It's time to do something that actually challenges you." Claire hugged her brother, feeling grateful and scared and hopeful all at once. The next morning, she woke to a text from Ethan. "Board meeting starts at 10. Say a prayer or whatever you do. I'll call you after." She spent the morning pacing her apartment, unable to focus on anything. Matteo made her breakfast, which she barely touched. The nursing service came by for his physical therapy, and Claire tried to work on her laptop but ended up just staring at the screen. At 11:30, her phone rang. Ethan's name on the screen. She answered immediately. "What happened?" "I'm still CEO." His voice was rough, exhausted, triumphant. "Barely." The vote was 7-5. Marco's statement swayed two board members who were on the fence. They didn't want to be seen as the company that killed a partnership with one of Europe's most respected luxury brands. Harrison's furious, but he's outvoted. The Giordano deal is approved. Claire felt relief crash through her so powerfully she had to sit down. "Ethan, that's incredible. It's not over. Harrison's going to keep fighting, and I made a lot of enemies today. But Claire, we did it. The partnership is real, and I get to keep trying to be the person I want to be instead of the person I was." "I'm proud of you." "Don't be proud yet. Now comes the hard part, actually making this work." He paused. "Have you thought about Marco's offer?" "Yes." "And?" Claire took a breath, feeling the future open up in front of her like a door she'd thought was locked forever. "And I'm going to say yes, on one condition." "What's that?" "You let me finish my master's degree while I'm doing the consulting work, part-time, online, whatever it takes. Because if I'm going to help preserve traditional craftsmanship, I should actually complete my research on how it works." Ethan laughed, the sound lighter than she'd ever heard it. "Done. I'll pay for the degree as part of your compensation package." "Anything else?" "Just one thing. Don't forget what you learned in Florence. Don't let the board or the pressure or the money turn you back into the person who destroyed Hendrik. Because if you do, I'm walking away. Partnership or no partnership. I won't forget, I promise. You'll make sure I don't." They talked for a few more minutes about logistics and next steps. When they hung up, Claire sat in her apartment, holding her phone, trying to process the fact that her entire life had just changed. She'd come to that restaurant 5 days ago carrying water glasses and crushing debt and no future she could see. Now she had a career, a purpose, and the chance to finish what she'd started 8 years ago. It felt impossible. It felt terrifying. It felt exactly right. Matteo appeared in the doorway. "So, did the billionaire survive?" "He survived, and I have a job." "Hell yes!" Matteo punched the air. "My sister, the international business consultant. That's so much cooler than my sister, the waitress." "Both versions of me are the same person, you know." "I know. But this version gets to travel to Italy and use her brain and probably makes enough money that I can stop feeling guilty about my medical bills." "You should never feel guilty about those." "Well, now I don't have to. So everybody wins." He grinned. "When do you start?" "Next week, apparently. I need to give notice at Luminaire, pack for another trip to Florence, and figure out how online graduate programs work." "Busy schedule. Better get started." Claire stood up, feeling energy return to her body. She had work to do, real work, important work, work that mattered. And for the first time in 8 years, she let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, everything was going to be okay. 3 months later, Claire stood in a conference room on the 42nd floor of Carlisle Capital, watching Ethan present the Giordano partnership results to a room full of skeptical executives. Through the windows behind him, Manhattan spread out in all directions, but her mind kept drifting back to Florence, to the workshop where she'd spent the last 6 weeks learning the language of leather and tradition. Revenue is up 18% in the luxury segment, Ethan was saying, clicking through slides that Claire had helped prepare. Customer retention is the highest we've ever seen, and the waiting list for Giordano pieces is now 6 months long. We're not just selling bags, we're selling authenticity, craftsmanship, and a story that resonates with consumers who are tired of disposable goods. Harrison sat in the corner, arms crossed, his face set in permanent disapproval. He'd lost the vote to remove Ethan, but he hadn't stopped fighting. Every board meeting became a battlefield, every decision a referendum on whether Ethan's new approach was sustainable or just expensive sentiment. The margins are still lower than our other luxury acquisitions, Harrison said when Ethan finished. We're investing 30 million euros for returns that won't break even for at least 3 years. That's not good business, Ethan. That's charity with a corporate veneer. It's investment in long-term value, Ethan countered. Giordano isn't a quick flip. It's a foundational piece of a new portfolio strategy, preserving legacy brands that have cultural significance and loyal customer bases. We've already had inquiries from 3 other European manufacturers who want similar partnerships. This isn't just one deal. It's a new model. A model that requires us to give up control and accept lower returns. You're asking shareholders to be patient while you experiment with feel-good capitalism. Claire watched Ethan's jaw tighten. 3 months ago, he would have responded with aggression, with dominance, with the kind of corporate warfare that made boardrooms go quiet. Now he took a breath and said something different. You're right that this requires patience. You're right that the returns are slower. But Harrison, what you're missing is that customers are changing. They want to know where their products come from. They want to support companies that actually value craftsmanship over exploitation. Giordano gives us credibility in that market, and that credibility is worth more than quick profits. We'll see if shareholders agree at the next quarterly review. Harrison stood up, gathering his papers. I hope you're prepared to defend these numbers when they start asking why their dividends are being sacrificed for Italian artisans. He left. The room exhaled collectively. Jennifer closed her laptop and looked at Ethan with a mixture of admiration and concern. He's going to keep pushing, she said quietly. Every quarter, every board meeting. You know that, right? I know, but I also know we're building something that works. It just takes time to prove it. Ethan looked at Claire. Ready for Florence? Our flight leaves in 4 hours. Ready, though I still think you're overpacking for a 3-day trip. I'm bringing James this time. 5-year-olds require a lot of luggage. That was new. In 3 months of partnership work, Ethan had kept his son carefully separate from his business life, a wall he was only now starting to dismantle. Bringing James to Florence felt significant, like Ethan was finally letting the different parts of his life touch each other. They flew out that evening, James bouncing in his seat with excitement about his first trip to Italy. Claire watched Ethan try to balance work emails with his son's constant questions, watched him slowly close the laptop and just be present. It was clumsy, imperfect. He still reflexively reached for his phone every few minutes, but it was progress. Claire, how do you say airplane in Italian? James asked, pressing his face to the window. Aereo, she said, smiling. And cloud is nuvola, and the sky is il cielo. Il cielo, James repeated carefully. Dad, are you listening? Il cielo means sky. Ethan looked up from his phone, guilty. I heard. Il cielo. That's beautiful. You weren't listening. You were looking at your emails. You're right. I'm sorry. Tell me again? James repeated the words, and this time Ethan paid attention, really paid attention, his focus on his son instead of the constant pull of work. Claire felt something warm in her chest watching them. This wasn't the arrogant billionaire from that first night in the restaurant. This was someone trying, failing, trying again. Someone learning that being present was harder and more important than being successful. They arrived in Florence early morning local time. Marco met them at the workshop with Alessandro, and a surprise, Giulia was there too, along with several other artisans who'd taken Claire under their wing during her training visits. We wanted to celebrate, Marco explained. The partnership is working, sales are strong. But more importantly, we are training 5 new apprentices. Young people who want to learn the old ways. This is the real success. James was fascinated by everything. The smell of leather, the tools hanging on walls, the careful precision of hands shaping material into art. Stefano, the old master, let him try beveling a piece of scrap leather, guiding his small hands with the same patience he'd shown Claire months ago. "You are good at this, little one," Stefano said in Italian, which Claire translated, "You have steady hands like your father should have." Ethan laughed. "I'm still terrible at leatherwork. I've accepted this." "But you are good at other things," Marco said. "You're good at listening now, at understanding what matters. This is more important than technical skill." They spent the day at the workshop. Ethan had brought contracts to review. The partnership was expanding into shared retail spaces in New York and London, locations where Giordano pieces would be sold alongside other preserved legacy brands that Carlyle Capital was now actively seeking out. But instead of diving into paperwork immediately, Ethan let James explore, answered his questions, showed him how the artisans worked. Claire watched father and son together, saw how Ethan was trying to show James that work could be about more than just winning, that it could be about building, preserving, honoring things that mattered. It wasn't perfect. Ethan still checked his phone too often, still got distracted by emails, but he was trying, and trying was enough. That evening, Marco invited them all to his home again. Lucia had prepared a feast, and the house was full of family. Alessandro's girlfriend was now his fiancée, Marco's grandchildren ran through the rooms, Bianca held court at the head of the table with the quiet authority of someone who'd seen everything and was impressed by very little. "To partnerships that work," Marco said, raising his glass, "and to the courage to try new things, even when they are difficult." They drank. James allowed a sip of heavily watered wine, made a face that made everyone laugh. After dinner, Claire found herself on the terrace with Bianca, looking out at the Tuscan hills turning purple in the twilight. "You have done good work," Bianca said in Italian. "Not just with the business, with him." She gestured toward the house where Ethan was helping James build something with blocks. "He is becoming human again. This is your doing." "He's doing it himself. I'm just witnessing it." "No, you are holding him accountable. This is different than witnessing. This is participating." Bianca looked at Claire seriously. "My husband used to say that the measure of a person is not what they do when succeeding, but what they do when failing. Mr. Carlyle has failed many times, but he keeps trying to be better. This is worth more than success that comes easily." "Do you trust him? Really trust him with your family's company?" "I trust that he is trying to be trustworthy, and I trust that you will tell us if he stops trying. This is enough." Bianca patted Claire's hand. "Also, I trust that you are doing your own work now, yes? Marco tells me you are completing your degree." "Part-time. It's slow going while traveling so much, but yes, I'm finally finishing my research." "Good. The world needs people who understand the value of preservation. Too many people only know how to destroy and rebuild, not enough know how to protect and honor." She paused. "There is a position, if you are interested, at the University of Florence. They are looking for someone to teach Renaissance craft traditions. I mentioned your name." Claire's heart skipped. "I haven't even finished my master's degree yet." "But you will. And when you do, there could be a place for you here, teaching, researching, helping us document our methods for future generations. Think about it. No pressure, just a possibility." Inside, James shrieked with laughter as his block tower collapsed. Ethan was laughing too, helping him rebuild, fully present in the moment instead of half-focused on the next email, the next crisis, the next thing to win. Claire thought about possibilities, about Florence and teaching and research that mattered, about New York and Matteo and the life she'd built from desperation and determination, about the fact that maybe, finally, she didn't have to choose between dreams and responsibilities. Maybe she could find a way to honor both. "I'll think about it," she said to Bianca. "Thank you." The next day was supposed to be dedicated to contract reviews and strategic planning. Instead, Ethan surprised everyone by suggesting they take the day off. "We've been working constantly for 3 months," he said. "James has never seen the Duomo. Claire's been coming to Florence for work but hasn't actually experienced the city. Let's be tourists for one day." Marco looked delighted. "This is good. You are learning balance, Alessandro. Take them to all the important places. Show them Florence the way locals see it, not the way tourists do. They spent the day wandering, the Duomo, the Uffizi, small churches that tourists overlooked, a gelateria that Alessandro swore made the best pistachio in the city. James held Claire's hand and asked endless questions, and Ethan actually put his phone away completely, just existing in the moment. "This is what I wanted Sarah to see," Ethan said quietly as they stood in front of Botticelli's Birth of Venus. She loved art. She would have spent hours in this museum. I kept promising we'd come to Italy together, but work always got in the way. And then she was gone, and I'd missed the chance. Claire watched him stare at the painting, grief and regret written on his face. "You're here now," she said gently, "with your son, showing him beauty. That's not nothing. It's not enough to make up for all the times I chose work over being present. It's not supposed to make up for anything. It's supposed to be the start of doing things differently." Claire looked at the painting, Venus emerging from the sea, beautiful and impossible and eternal. "You can't change the past, Ethan. You can only change what you do next." "What if what I do next still isn't enough? Then you try again. That's all any of us can do. Keep trying, keep failing, keep trying again. The only real failure is stopping." James tugged on Ethan's hand, wanting to see the next room. They moved on, and Claire stayed for a moment longer, looking at the painting and thinking about beauty that survived centuries, about traditions that outlasted individual lives, about the ways humans tried to make meaning out of chaos. Her phone buzzed, a text from Matteo. "How's Italy round 2? Did you eat all the gelato yet?" "Working on it," she typed back. "How's the new physical therapist?" "Amazing. She's teaching me techniques the old one didn't know existed. I might actually be able to walk better by next year. That's incredible. I'm so proud of you." Right back at you. "My sister, the international consultant. Still can't believe that's real." Claire smiled. "Neither can I sometimes. But it is. And I think I might have a teaching opportunity here eventually. If I want it. Do you want it?" She thought about the question, really thought about it. Did she want to teach in Florence? To split her life between 2 continents, 2 languages, 2 versions of herself? Or was she still clinging to the fantasy that she could recapture her old dreams exactly as she'd imagined them? "I want to finish what I started," she typed. "But I'm not sure I want the same things I wanted 8 years ago. I'm different now. My dreams should be different too. That's probably healthy. Also very mature. Who are you, and what did you do with my sister who stress eats crackers at 2 a.m.? She's still here, just learning to want new things without feeling guilty about it. Good. You deserve new things. You deserve all the things." Claire put away her phone and caught up with Ethan and James in the next gallery. They stayed at the museum for hours, then walked along the Arno as the sun set, and for the first time since arriving in Florence, Claire wasn't thinking about work or partnerships or responsibilities. She was just existing in the moment, letting herself be present without purpose. That night, after James had fallen asleep in the hotel room, Ethan knocked on Claire's door. "Sorry to bother you. I wanted to talk about something. If you have a minute?" She let him in. He looked nervous, which was unusual. Ethan had learned how to be vulnerable, but nervous was different. "I've been thinking about the teaching position Bianca mentioned to you," he said. "And I wanted to say, if you take it, if you decide Florence is where you want to be, I'll make sure Matteo has everything he needs in New York. Full medical coverage, better physical therapy, whatever helps him thrive. You shouldn't have to choose between taking care of him and pursuing your dreams." "Ethan, we talked about this. I'm not your charity project." "You're not. You're my partner, and partners support each other." He sat down, exhausted. "You changed my life. I'm not exaggerating. You showed me that I could do business differently, that success didn't have to mean destroying everything in my path. You saved the Giordano partnership. You saved my relationship with my son. You saved me from becoming someone I would have hated. Let me help you finish your degree and pursue the career you actually want, not as charity, as gratitude." Claire felt tears prick her eyes. "I don't know how to accept help without feeling like I owe someone." "Then learn. The same way I'm learning how to give help without expecting control in return. We're both figuring this out as we go." He smiled slightly. "Besides, Matteo told me you stress-eat crackers at 2 a.m. Clearly you need all the support you can get." "You've been texting my brother?" He texts me, mostly to make fun of how bad I am at work-life balance. He's a good kid, and he wants you to be happy. So do I. Claire wiped her eyes, laughing despite the tears. This is all happening so fast. 6 months ago, I was waiting tables and drowning in debt. Now I'm consulting on international partnerships and considering teaching positions in Italy. It doesn't feel real. It's real. You earned it. All of it. Ethan stood up to leave, then paused. Claire, can I ask you something? And you can absolutely say no. What? The formal partnership agreement gets signed next month. We're having a celebration in New York. Board members, investors, the Giordano family, press. It's going to be this big corporate event that I usually hate. But I'd like you there. Not as my employee or my consultant, as my friend. If that's something you'd be comfortable with. Friend. The word felt both too small and exactly right for what they'd become to each other. Not quite colleagues, not quite anything definable, but people who'd changed each other in ways that mattered. I'd be honored, she said, as long as the crackers at this event are better than what I usually stress eat. I'll make sure they're artisanal. He left, and Claire sat in her hotel room looking out at Florence at night, trying to process everything. Her phone buzzed again. Matteo sending a photo of himself with the new physical therapist, both of them grinning. Making progress, his text said, literally and figuratively. Stop worrying about me and go live your life. She typed back, I'm trying. It's harder than it looks. Everything worth doing is. Now go to sleep. You have a billionaire to keep honest tomorrow. Claire smiled and got ready for bed. Tomorrow they'd finalize retail agreements and discuss expansion strategies. Tomorrow she'd continue being the bridge between Ethan's ambition and Marco's traditions. Tomorrow she'd keep building this new life she was still learning to inhabit. But tonight, she let herself feel grateful for the impossible chain of events that had brought her here. The humiliation in a restaurant, the desperate gamble on a phone call, the slow transformation of a man who'd forgotten how to be human. Sometimes, Claire thought as she drifted off to sleep, the best things in life came from the worst moments. You just had to be brave enough to keep showing up. The partnership signing event happened 4 weeks later in a ballroom at the Plaza Hotel that probably cost more to rent than Claire's entire yearly salary. She wore a dress she'd bought specifically for the occasion. Not too formal, not too casual, the kind of thing that said, professional consultant who knows her value, instead of waitress pretending to belong here. The room was full of people who doubted this partnership would work. Harrison was there, looking sour but polite. The board members who'd almost voted Ethan out were making small talk and pretending they'd supported him all along. Investors clustered around Marco and Alessandro, suddenly very interested in the traditional craftsmanship they'd dismissed 6 months ago. Claire stood near the windows, watching it all unfold, when Giulia appeared at her elbow. Too many fancy people, Giulia said in Italian, her discomfort obvious. I prefer the workshop. Me too, Claire agreed. But this is part of it. The performance that makes the real work possible. You sound like Marco. He says the same thing. Giulia looked at her seriously. Are you going to take the teaching position? He told me the university is waiting for your answer. I don't know yet. I love the work I'm doing now. I love splitting time between New York and Florence, but teaching feels like going back to who I was before everything fell apart, and I'm not sure that person exists anymore. Good. That person was just beginning. This person is actually living. Giulia squeezed her arm. Don't go backward, Claire. Go forward. Teach if it serves your future, not your past. Across the room, Ethan was talking to a reporter, and Claire heard him say something that made her smile. The Giordano partnership works because we stopped treating it like an acquisition and started treating it like a relationship. That requires patience, respect, and the willingness to admit when you're wrong. Those aren't traditional business values, but maybe they should be. The reporter scribbled notes, clearly surprised by the answer. Harrison, standing nearby, looked like he'd swallowed something bitter. James appeared, tugging on Claire's dress. Are you coming to the signing? Dad said you have to be there because you're important. I'm not important. I'm just the translator. Dad says you're more than that. He says you're the reason any of this worked. James took her hand. Come on. They're about to start. She let him pull her toward the front of the room, where a table had been set up with contracts and photographers and too many people crowding around. Marco saw her and gestured for her to come closer. You should be in the photographs, he said. This partnership is as much your work as anyone's. Marco, I'm just a consultant. You are the heart of this partnership. You understood what we were trying to protect before any of us could articulate it. You belong in this moment. So Claire stood there, awkward and honored, as Ethan and Marco signed the formal agreements. Cameras flashed. People applauded. Harrison managed a tight smile, and Claire felt the strange unreality of watching her life transform in real time. After the signing, there were speeches. Marco talked about tradition and innovation. Alessandro discussed the new apprenticeship programs. One of the board members gave a corporate speech about shareholder value that made everyone's eyes glaze over. Then Ethan took the microphone and the room went quiet. 6 months ago, I was about to make the biggest mistake of my career, he said. I was trying to acquire the Giordano company the same way I'd acquired dozens of companies before, with aggression, control, and complete certainty that I knew better than the people who'd built something over 90 years. I was wrong, and I probably would have destroyed this partnership before it even began if not for one person. He looked directly at Claire. Claire Bennett was a waitress at the restaurant where I was failing to negotiate with Marco. She overheard me destroying 18 months of work with arrogance and cultural insensitivity. And instead of staying silent, instead of letting me fail, she stepped in and showed me a different way. She taught me that business could be built on respect instead of dominance, that some things are worth protecting even when they're not immediately profitable, that changing yourself is harder and more important than changing others. Claire felt her face flush as everyone turned to look at her. Claire, you saved this partnership, but more than that, you saved me from becoming someone I would have hated. You reminded me that my son deserves a father who's present, not just successful. You showed me that admitting weakness is actually strength, and you did all of this while finishing your own degree, taking care of your brother, and learning a craft that most people wouldn't have the patience to attempt. Ethan's voice was rough with emotion. So this partnership signing isn't just about Carlyle Capital and Giordano. It's about what happens when people have the courage to challenge each other to be better. Thank you for having that courage. Thank you for not giving up on me even when I gave you every reason to. Mocos. The room applauded. Claire blinked back tears, overwhelmed and embarrassed and grateful all at once. Across the room, she saw Matteo, who'd insisted on coming despite his fatigue, grinning and giving her a thumbs up. After the speeches, people clustered around the bar and the hors d'oeuvres. Claire escaped to the terrace, needing air and quiet and a moment to process everything. She was standing there, looking out at Central Park, when her phone rang. An unknown number with an Italian country code. Hello? Ms. Bennett? This is Professor Martinelli from the University of Florence. I hope I'm not calling at a bad time. Claire's heart started pounding. No, not at all. How can I help you? I wanted to follow up on the teaching position we discussed. We've reviewed your research proposal and your work with the Giordano Partnership. The department would like to offer you a visiting professorship starting next semester. You'd teach one seminar on Renaissance craft traditions and have time to complete your own research. The position includes housing in Florence and a research budget. Are you interested? Claire looked through the windows at the ballroom, at Ethan talking to investors, at Marco and his family celebrating, at the life she'd built from nothing but desperation and stubbornness. Then she looked out at New York, at the city that had almost broken her, but had also made her stronger. Can I think about it? She asked. I need to talk to my family first. Of course. Take your time. But Ms. Bennett, I want you to know your work matters. The research you've done on preserving traditional craftsmanship while encouraging innovation is exactly what our program needs. We would be honored to have you. They hung up. Claire stood on the terrace, holding her phone, feeling the weight of choices pressing down on her. Matteo found her a few minutes later, navigating the terrace carefully with his cane. You okay? You look like someone just offered you something impossible. The university in Florence wants me to teach there, starting next semester. That's amazing. Why do you look terrified? Because it means leaving New York, leaving you. And yes, I know you're 19 and don't need me hovering, but Matteo, you're my family. You're the reason I kept going when everything fell apart. How do I just leave you? Matteo sat down on one of the terrace chairs, exhausted from standing. Claire, do you remember what you told me when I wanted to quit physical therapy because it was too hard and too painful? That anything worth having requires fighting for. Right. So fight for this. Fight for your career and your research and your dreams. Stop treating my existence like an obligation you have to fulfill. I'm going to be fine. Better than fine, actually. The new physical therapy is working. I'm back in school part-time, and I have an actual social life now. You did your job. You kept me alive and gave me a future. Now go live yours. When did you get so mature? I've always been mature. You were just too busy parenting me to notice. He smiled. Take the job in Florence. Finish your degree. Teach students about preserving beautiful things. And stop feeling guilty about wanting a life that doesn't revolve around taking care of me. Claire hugged him, feeling tears spill over. I love you so much. Love you too. Now go back in there and tell the Italian professor you're taking the job, before you overthink it and talk yourself out of it. She went back inside, found a quiet corner, and called Professor Martinelli back. I accept, she said. When do I start? The next 3 months were chaos, finishing her consulting work with Carlisle Capital, preparing her research materials, working with the university on curriculum, and making sure Matteo had support systems in place before she left. Ethan created a permanent position for her as a consultant on legacy partnerships, which meant she'd still work with Giordano and whatever other companies joined the program, just remotely from Florence. You're building something new, Ethan said during their last meeting in New York. A hybrid career that most people would say is impossible. That's very you. Is that a compliment? Absolutely. You don't do things the conventional way. You find third options when everyone else sees only 2 choices. It's your superpower. What's yours? I'm still figuring that out, but I think it might be learning. I spent 32 years thinking I already knew everything. Turns out I knew almost nothing about what actually matters. He handed her an envelope. This is for you. Don't open it until you get to Florence. What is it? A letter. And a gift. And an apology for taking so long to understand what you were trying to teach me. Claire left for Florence on a cold December morning, Matteo insisting on coming to the airport despite the early hour. They said goodbye at security, awkward, emotional, full of promises to video chat weekly and visit during breaks. Make me proud, Matteo said. I thought I already did that. You did. Now keep doing it, forever. No pressure. She laughed through tears, hugged him one more time, and went through security. The flight was long and Claire slept poorly, too anxious about everything changing again. But when she landed in Florence and saw the city spread out beneath the plane, she felt something settle in her chest. This was right. Terrifying, but right. Professor Martinelli met her at the airport, along with Julia, who'd apparently adopted Claire as a personal project. They drove her to her new apartment, a small place near the university with a view of terracotta roofs and the Duomo in the distance. It was barely furnished, cold despite the heater, and absolutely perfect. Classes start in 2 weeks, Professor Martinelli said. That gives you time to settle in and prepare. But please, if you need anything, the department is here to support you. After he left, Julia helped Claire unpack. They worked in comfortable silence, and when Julia finally left, Claire sat on her new couch in her new apartment in her new life, trying to believe it was real. She remembered Ethan's envelope and opened it carefully. Inside was a letter, handwritten, and a check that made her gasp. The letter read, Claire, by the time you read this, you'll be in Florence starting your teaching position. I wanted to write this now while I still have the clarity to express what your friendship has meant to me. You met me at my worst, arrogant, dismissive, so convinced of my own rightness that I'd lost sight of basic human decency. You could have walked away. Instead, you challenged me to be better, not with judgment or contempt, but with honesty and the belief that change was possible. I'm not the same person I was 6 months ago. I'm not even sure who I'm becoming, but I know that whoever that person is, they're better because you refused to let me settle for being less than I could be. The check is for your student loans, all of them. Not as payment, you've earned far more than I could ever compensate you for. But as a gift, so you can start this new chapter without the weight of old debt holding you back. You fought for your dreams while carrying impossible burdens. You don't have to carry them anymore. Thank you for saving the Giordano partnership. Thank you for helping me become a better father to James. Thank you for showing me that success without integrity is just expensive emptiness. You're going to be an extraordinary professor. Your students are lucky to learn from someone who understands that preserving beauty is as important as creating it. Your friend Ethan. Claire read the letter 3 times, crying and laughing and feeling grateful and overwhelmed. The check was for $127,000, the exact amount of her student debt. She'd mentioned it once, months ago, in passing. He'd remembered. She called him immediately. He answered on the first ring. "Did you open it?" he asked. "Ethan, I can't accept this. It's too much. It's not nearly enough. And yes, you can accept it. Consider it an investment in your future. The world needs more people like you, people who understand that some things are worth preserving even when they're not profitable. Teach your students that. Research it. Write about it. Make it matter." "I don't know what to say. Say you'll keep in touch. Say you'll come back to New York sometimes and tell me when I'm slipping back into old patterns. Say you'll remember that you changed someone's life just by refusing to let them fail quietly." "I'll do all of those things. Thank you, Ethan, for everything. Thank you, Claire, for being brave enough to speak up when it mattered." They talked for a while longer, about James's excitement about starting kindergarten, about the new legacy partnerships Carlisle Capital was pursuing, about Mateo's progress in physical therapy. Then they said goodbye, and Claire sat in her Florence apartment holding her phone, feeling the weight of her old life finally lift. Her first semester teaching was hard. Her Italian was fluent, but academic lecturing required different skills. Her students were skeptical at first, this young American professor who claimed to understand Renaissance craft traditions. But Claire had learned from Julia and Stefano and Marco. She knew that mastery came from patience, from failing and trying again, from honoring what came before while building something new. She took her students to workshops. She arranged demonstrations by artisans who'd spent 50 years perfecting their crafts. She showed them that tradition and innovation weren't opposites. They were partners in the same dance, each making the other stronger. By winter break, her students were engaged, asking questions that went beyond grades and into genuine curiosity. Claire felt the same satisfaction she'd felt in that Florentine workshop, watching her hands learn to shape leather, the deep pleasure of work that mattered. She went back to New York for the holidays. Matteo met her at the airport, walking better than he had in years, his smile wide and genuine. "You look happy," he said, hugging her. "Like, actually happy. Not just getting through it happy." "I am happy. Teaching is hard, but it's good hard. The kind that makes you better instead of just tired." "Good. You deserve good hard. You've had enough bad hard for one lifetime." She spent Christmas with Matteo, and the day after, Ethan invited them both to his apartment for dinner. James was bigger, more confident, full of stories about his new school and his new friends. He dragged Claire to his room to show her a project he'd made, a hand-stitched pencil case that Stefano had helped him create during Ethan's last trip to Florence. "Dad says making things by hand is important," James explained, "because it reminds us that humans can create beautiful things when we care about our work." Claire looked at Ethan, who was standing in the doorway watching his son with obvious pride. "He's learning," Ethan said quietly. "We both are." They had dinner, nothing fancy, just pasta and salad and conversation. Matteo and James bonded over video games. Ethan and Claire talked about the partnerships, about teaching, about the strange paths that had brought them to this moment. "Harrison resigned from the board last month," Ethan said. He couldn't accept that the legacy partnership model was actually working. Too much cognitive dissonance between his worldview and reality. "Are you okay with that?" "I'm relieved. Fighting him at every board meeting was exhausting. Now I have space to actually build instead of constantly defending." He paused. "We're launching 4 new partnerships next quarter. A textile manufacturer in Scotland, a pottery studio in Japan, a furniture maker in North Carolina. North Carolina. The son of the Hendrick founder reached out. He wants to rebuild what I destroyed, but differently. With protections, with respect for the workers, with actual commitment to craft. He asked if I'd partner with him." Ethan's voice was rough. "I said yes. I can't undo what I did 8 years ago. But maybe I can help build something better in its place." Claire reached across the table and squeezed his hand. "That's good. That's really good. It's terrifying, but most good things are." Later, after Matteo and James had fallen asleep in front of a movie, Claire and Ethan stood on his terrace, looking out at Manhattan, glittering in the cold December night. "Do you ever regret it?" Ethan asked. "Taking this job in Florence? Leaving New York?" "Sometimes." But regret is complicated. I miss Mateo. I miss the life I knew. But I also love what I'm building. Both things are true. That's very mature of you. I learned it from watching someone learn to balance being a father and being a CEO. Turns out you can be multiple things at once. You just have to accept that you'll be imperfect at all of them. Ethan laughed. I'm definitely imperfect at all of them, but I'm trying. That's something. They stood in comfortable silence, and Claire thought about all the impossible things that had happened since that night in the restaurant. She'd been invisible then, just another waitress bringing water to people who didn't see her. Now she was a professor, a consultant, someone who'd helped reshape how a billion-dollar company approached partnerships. But more than that, she'd remembered who she was beneath the survival and the struggle. She'd rediscovered the woman who'd loved learning, who'd chosen art history because it mattered more than it paid, who'd believed that preserving beauty was worth fighting for. Thank you, she said quietly. For what? For being brave enough to change, for letting me be part of that change, for showing me that people can actually become better if they're willing to do the work. Right back at you, Ethan said. You could have let me fail that night in the restaurant. Instead, you saved me. I'll never forget that. I didn't save you. I just reminded you who you were before you forgot. Same thing. They went back inside, and Claire helped Ethan carry a sleeping Mateo to the guest room. Her brother looked peaceful, younger than his 19 years, and Claire felt grateful for all the choices that had brought them to this moment. The next morning, she flew back to Florence. The semester started in 2 weeks, and she had lectures to prepare, research to continue, a life to keep building. It wasn't the life she'd imagined at 22 when she'd first started her master's program. It was better, messier, more complicated, earned through struggle instead of given through fortune. On the plane, Claire opened her laptop and started working on a paper about craft preservation in the modern economy. She wrote about the Giordano partnership, about what happened when businesses prioritized legacy over quarterly earnings. She wrote about the artisans who'd taught her patience and precision. She wrote about the ways humans create meaning through work that matters. And she wrote about transformation, how people could change if they had the courage to admit they were wrong, the humility to learn from others, and the persistence to keep trying even when failure seemed inevitable. The paper wouldn't change the world, but it might change how a few people thought about business and craft and the responsibility to preserve beauty even when it wasn't profitable. That was enough. 6 months later, Claire was invited back to New York to speak at a conference on ethical business practices. Ethan was on the same panel, along with Marco and several other CEOs who'd started adopting similar partnership models. She stood backstage, nervous despite months of teaching, and Ethan appeared at her elbow. "Ready?" he asked. "No. You?" "Not even a little. But we're doing it anyway." They walked out together, and Claire looked at the audience. Hundreds of business people who'd come to hear about building companies that valued more than just profit. She thought about the waitress she'd been, invisible and exhausted and certain her dreams were dead. She thought about the woman she'd become, imperfect, still learning, but no longer invisible. And she stepped up to the microphone and started talking about what happened when you were brave enough to speak up, even when the person you were challenging had all the power. About what happened when you demanded that people be better and refused to accept less. About what happened when you built partnerships based on respect instead of control. About what happened when you preserved beauty instead of destroying it for profit. The audience listened. Some looked skeptical, others looked interested. A few looked like they were actually hearing something that might change how they did business. That was enough. After the panel, a young woman approached Claire, maybe 25, wearing a server's uniform from the hotel restaurant where the conference was being held. "Excuse me?" the woman said nervously. "I heard you speak about how you were a waitress and now you're a professor. I'm working 3 jobs and trying to finish my degree, and sometimes I think I'm crazy for not just giving up. But you didn't give up, so maybe I shouldn't either." Claire looked at this woman who reminded her so much of herself, and she said the thing she wished someone had said to her 8 years ago. "You're not crazy. You're brave, and the world needs people who are brave enough to fight for dreams that don't come easily. Keep going. It's worth it. I promise." The woman thanked her and left. Claire stood in the conference center watching people network and make connections, and she felt the weight of her choices settle into something like peace. She'd built a life from broken pieces. She'd turned humiliation into opportunity. She'd helped a broken man remember his humanity. She'd preserved traditions that might have died. She taught students to value beauty over efficiency. It wasn't the life she'd planned. It was better. That evening, Ethan hosted a small dinner, just Claire, Matteo, James, Marco's family who'd flown in for the conference, and a few of the artisans from the Florentine workshop who'd come to see New York. They ate at a restaurant that served simple, beautiful food, and they talked about work and family and the strange paths that brought people together. To impossible partnerships, Marco said, raising his glass. And to the courage to try new things, even when everyone says they will fail. They drank. Claire looked around the table, at these people who'd become family through shared work and mutual respect. At Matteo, thriving and independent. At James, learning that work could be about more than winning. At Ethan, still imperfect but trying every day to be better. At herself reflected in the window, no longer invisible, no longer just surviving, but actually living. And she thought about how sometimes the worst moments led to the best transformations, how humiliation could become opportunity, how desperation could become determination, how invisible people could become essential. The story didn't end with perfect resolution. Claire still struggled with balancing her career and her family. Ethan still fought with his board about prioritizing legacy over profit. Marco's company still faced challenges from fast fashion and changing markets. Matteo still dealt with his disability and all its complications. But they were all trying. Building, failing, trying again. Creating partnerships based on respect. Preserving beauty even when it was difficult. Becoming better versions of themselves through the hard work of actual change. And that, Claire thought as she laughed at something Alessandro said, as she watched James show Matteo photos from his recent trip to Florence, as she caught Ethan's eye across the table and saw gratitude and friendship reflected back at her. That was enough. Not perfect, not easy, not the fantasy she'd once imagined, but real, hard-won, worth fighting for. Enough.